in the chemist. But it's basically about the first proof. It must be true that the Rambam made after 26 proofs because 26 Hanochas, 26. How do you say Hanochas in English?
Premises,
yeah. Premise is a better word.
The better word you can't get when you hear using Hanochas.
What other Hanochas from the Babich?
No, Hanochas.
Write down a man.
No, Hanochas. No, I think Hanochas means you're talking Hanochas means consumption.
An assumption or a premise. It could be the Rambam uses actually sometimes an assumption because it's 26 Hanocha, which the whole thing that he's only saying it liatzia, that we discussed. But it's premises, yeah. So now, okay, so let's try to start from the beginning. I decided I'm speaking officially in English. That's why it's officially. The basic story is like this: the Rambam as well as one of his Rebbe's, Averroes, Ibn Rushd, said that the best proof for the existence of God is this proof. The first proof. And the Rambam sagt das auch in Perek Aleph, Perek Ein, Perek, he quoted. I made a mark, remember where. He said, in chapter 70, at the end of chapter 70, is this. Yeah. Which Indian? He discussed in chapter 70, which is, he talks about Reich of Shemaim. Talks about, so this is the Rambam's Perek and Perek Ein, which is very interesting. Basically, the Rambam has his deliberately confused book, and especially Chelek Aleph is very easy to see how it's deliberately confused because it does have some kind of structure, and there's like 3 parallel structures running through it. So Chelek Aleph in Sukstam, Chelek Aleph in Moira is like supposedly a dictionary, where he goes through what he calls Minochem, Shemas Mishitofim. So this word means really this, but Loyak Shema, this word really means this, and so on. And then randomly puts in other things, like sometimes in the middle of a parak, sometimes it's a whole bunch of Brooklyn that somehow, like Derech Drish, to have some connection with the word that he's supposedly explaining, and it's Bedavka. He talks about that it's Bedavka like that. So now, basically, the Rambam, I'm saying this because everything comes back to this in the Rambam. A mistake, because I said that I tried at least to separate the first dikki from the next 2 or the next 3. Right? Well, the next 2. Let's forget about the third one. The fourth one, right? Next 2, which are Yechida, which I give. And I tried to say, which is somewhat true, but we have to think about it more. When we read the Rambam, we only read the first halacha, which is talking about Metzias Hashem and Heyosimani Gagalba, which at least in my summary, is like the Shem Avaya and the Shem Avna, the Shem Elohim. And the Rambam says El Olam, that's very important. And the Rambam talks about God being the God of the world. So there is God as the God of existence. We could say Shem Avaya, Mechiv Metzias, which goes to one concept of God that is important. And the Rambam uses always the pusik from the Avram Avinu. Every book that he writes, he starts with this pusik. B'Shem Hashem Elolam. Right? Yeah. And Sefer and Sefer Moed 3 times. Each book he wrote it again. And that's it's like his header. Yeah. It's like Kapach has a whole title because the Arabs. This is like an Arab style to start Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So in the name of God, B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Hashem is like it's a Muslim nisach. Not Yiddish nisach. Because Eden say like Burich Hashem, which is something very similar. Like Mask Hashem Shemaim Ala Zevach. We have these kind of ideas of like B'Shem Hashem, but it's not the dig. It all comes from the same source. But like then so look to start like we start like to us how do we start something? Right? It's like there's different. This goes back to our discussions all the time. How you refer to God. And all these like different nuances.
In the first block in the finish you're saying.
So no, it's like in the Arabs, the Quran does this, right? But in the Arabs it's a minhag. Like they say you're supposed to say for everything Bismillah, B'Shem Allah, B'Shem Hashem. They hold like Muslim hold in Shechita of the Arabs, don't Shalit. Arab allowed to eat from Yiddish Shechita because the Iker Shechita by Arab Muslims the line. Is that you have to be maskish Hashem Shemaim Ala Zevach. You have to shecht it b'Shem Hashem. So they say Yid says a bracha, so it's Yotze technically with Yiddish Shechita also, because it's also the same bracha. But it's without the bracha, it wouldn't help. So by us, Eke Shechita, you shouldn't be pleased. There's all the Elcha Shechita.
Big Shiloh.
We read it the opposite, right? So it's like to us.
The big Shiloh is a hefsek, because I'm not saying some Georgestalt today.
Because they make hefsek?
Nein,
make hefsek for Yidden? You don't make hefsek.
Nein.
Make one bracha for the whole day.
The Arabs is in its rule, they won't give the Tritus for the Arabs.
No.
Nor the Arabs only take it if they do an Allah Akbar for glach for the Schiete. Kent dan gewollt zoeken tussen de bruggen in de
the Arabs
the Arabs will kennen das kennen.
This is a primer Arab in his language.
Yes, gesehen amol as.
Okay, good.
Could be.
Interesting. Yeah, but that's the idea that there's a lot of like just proclaiming. So the Arab religion is actually the Muslim religion is the closest to what the Rambam wants from religion, really, because so many things. Because they're very much about proclaiming or confirming or affirming, being Mayit Shahada, right? Shahada is Middah Islam. There's five pillars, 5 Yesodis of Islam, and actually there's the andere then. Basically to daven and to give tzedukah and to fast on Ramadan and to the fifth or one of them is Shahada. We made Shahada is Edis. We made and basically La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. There's no God but God, and Muhammad is God's messenger. Rasul means shliach, messenger. And that's the word that the Rambam uses usually for Nabi. Yeah. And that's like a thing. In other words, proclaiming the truth, like to say, like just to say. The Yiddish Christians also have this kind of thing sometimes, but not only because they're much more elaborate religion. But the Yiddish way usually of like saying something is never really like that. Like we have even Shema, which is like Kabbalas Olam, it's like a whole another din. From a Kabbalah, like there's already, I never know exactly what Kabbalas Olam means in Chazal, like what the language exactly means. But it's related more to the whole concept in the Torah. We have a bris, we have there's like two sides to this relationship. There's God and there's us, and we could say no. In other words, when you say Shema, right? When you say Shema, it's like Ke'eli is a Ken Zogin 9. Like who asks you, right? The Arabs will say, like it's different than Hava and Yira, like Holtzman likes to talk about these kind of things, right? In the Arab way, this is the Arab way. It's not. He likes to say that it's the pagan way, but it's not really.
Holtzman?
Yeah. Holtzman likes to say that the Zura have this says a pusik Mika good la shlo lehim kroivim elef kashem lekan v'cholker alei elef. Andere wette, alle andere Gerte, they have a get. Everyone has a God, right? You din Kemosh, you din Baal, and so on. But none of their gods are close to them. Because their God, not our God, is closest to us. That's not how we thought of the pusik. That's not how can that be touched. Pusik is touched. Who is the other nation has a God that's close to them as us with our God. So Nishnor, we have the right God or our God or the God is closer to us. The kind of connection that we have to our God is closer than the one that they have to their God. Of course, besides their God being a fake God, but it's also a Vatican God. But it's not exactly. So the way he would see it is this is really the Muslim or the Rambam is really way up seeking God, although the Rambam doesn't have a far God, but it's for other reasons. But the idea would be like, who asked you, right? We have to ask this question. I asked everyone this question. Who asked you? And if you're not, it's not going to change anything. Either he is or he isn't. Nobody asked you. But the whole Torah of Torah, of Yiddish, Jewish Torah, is about it that we do ask you.
They should acknowledge it.
And the Zohar talks about it in his way and whatever, but not only acknowledge. See, acknowledge is the wrong word because acknowledge means.
But definitely bring it.
So this is also more in the Rambam's way, or in the Muslim way. In other words, in the B'Shem Hashem. Like for example, this is a big difference, right? In the traditional Jews don't really start things. That's another thing, but the Gemara doesn't have like a psicha or a akdama or anything like that. But that's a very matter. And if you see any book that has an akdama, you know it was written like after the Elif HaShishi. The Zohar doesn't have that. No, it's not true. It's fake akdama. The Zohar akdama is Zohar. Even if the Zohar has an akdama, it's a fake akdama. It's not akdama about this. It's nothing. It's just a random part of Zohar that's called akdama. The akdama Zohar is just a parish on Pashas Berej. It's not an akdama in any real sense.
I just always say the akdama.
There's some meta, but there is some meta in the Zohar, but generally, but it's not. The akdama is God, not such a good example of that. Akdama Zohar is just called the Drike called like that. I don't know if it's real. I don't know. I've written. I think I looked researched this Pashas Berej. It's not real akdama. I don't think.
was one time more neighbor I said, I was going to make Akdama to shot this would be the Akdama. Then I said, that's it up. I had no chapter. No, how the third was given over. And I said it, I have this is the Akdama. No, it said how perfect was given over.
What do you I didn't
Yeah.
I don't think Akdama to shot.
Technically, the Mishnah has like Shagdoma. Okay. Anyways, but Nachlein is no. So this is like acknowledging is not. That's not what it means. No, that's not. So like I don't know. I'm trying to like think of an analogous kind of thing. Like who else has a different pusik? Like we're taught to start like b'siyata d'shmaya, like right. Be'ezras Hashem, something like that. I don't know where it comes from.
It's Shlo. Where's the Shlo come from?
Maybe it's older. I don't know. Where's the it comes from the Shlo b'siyata d'shmaya.
No, that's Hashem. They should say the whole Shlo went to the I mean, they brought down every single.
But it's much.
Oh, that was b'siyata d'shmaya. I'm saying Be'ezras Hashem. If we do something from Yosef,
that must be all. No, that's from Yosef. That's from Chazal. Like Shem Shmom Shugal Piv. But what's?
No, that's Hashem. It even comes from. So
it's Arabic. It's for sure a Muslim thing before it's a Jewish thing. There's vice. Muslims have a big thing, but their word is not Be'ezras Hashem. The word is what is the word? Inshallah, but it's on Hashem. Big difference. Inshallah, Im Yirtzeh Hashem. Im Yirtzeh Hashem and Be'ezras Hashem are very two whole different theologies. Im Yirtzeh Hashem is like the Stoics would say, faith permitting. Im Yirtzeh Hamaz Hagoyro. That means Hashkuchas Hashem in the end, but they didn't do that. In other words, because you weiß dich nicht, how do you know that you're going to do something? Maybe God won't let. Im Yirtzeh Hashem, I'll do it. That's not really generally Jewish traditional way of thinking. We do think that people have Bechira generally, although some people don't. But it's a lot. The Jewish religion has never been very fatalistic religion. If there's a religion that's fatalistic, it's the Muslim religion. It's always been much more on the side of God does everything and we're just bonds. But so this is a big difference. Inshallah, Im Yirtzeh Hashem and Be'ezras Hashem mean two different things. What Inshallah means, ich weiß nicht. I've got that lazen. Dann, I'm law. That's Inshallah. Be'ezrat Hashem is He will help. Basically, I'm asking Him to help. You can get into like the yikim, but it's basically I will do it with His help. I'm going to say and B'Shem Hashem, I don't know exactly what that means. It's kind of like
he
does.
Yeah.
And from as a third,
he does. He had a lot of time. But every
B'Shem Hashem is like it's basically in the Rambam's language. It basically means I'm just proclaiming. I would say the word witness. I'm just being ma'id. I'm witnessing. I'm ma'id that it's like this. But I don't really have any. The interesting things I'm very passive in this thing. I'm only being you could say like transparent before the reality, but I'm not doing anything. Nothing really happens when you say B'Shem Hashem. The only thing that happens is in your mind. You acknowledge, like people say, what do we mean when we say Mamlech Hashem? We mean to say that we acknowledge that He's the Melech. That's a passive human. The humans are the passive receivers of the truth. That's a very philosophical way of thinking, because philosophy is all about knowing the truth, knowing there's nothing you to do, and that's practical philosophy or political philosophy, and so that would be about what humans actually do. But thought as such, is just about knowing the truth. There's nothing to do really. You could try to get to the truth by the eyes, by all kinds of there's ways that we get to it by philosophizing basically, by making shaklavitari, playing kasha, bis mit der unkimen. But with unkimen, we're not really doing anything to the reality. We're just letting the reality come to us, if you want to look at it like that, that kind of image. That's B'Shem Hashem. Okay, that's.
The Yiddishkeit is nicht
the traditional Yiddishkeit is not really like this. Our God is a God that helps us. Very big difference. He's the guy that takes out of Mitzrayim and is going to kill our enemies. And that's what we talk about. We don't really talk about Him existing or Him being the Manig, the Amelech. Not really. In Shemashuna we do sometimes. There's this Yiddishkeit has you can find everything. I'm just saying that the tradition,
you don't find Malchus in the whole Torah.
Yeah.
3 times.
Right.
You say Mitchell.
Only twice.
The Mitchell stuff and I'm trying to find something from Malchus. They feel and the 2 that come up don't even work. Not the past.
There's 2. There's one. There's only one.
Only one.
Only one. And that's okay. I understand. No,
that's what.
So the Shira Sayam, but it's talking about love. It's not. It's
not
belonging. It's not. It's not yet.
Right.
Whatever. Mikdash Hashem. It's not initially. It's not really at the time of Shira Sayam. It's whenever it will. I don't know when. Maybe. I'm not sure what it means. Okay. I'm just saying it's kind of not. It's not chronologically weird. The meaning of it is not weird. Okay. There's one other one. Okay. No, I don't think okay, we have to think what Melech Taka means. But the point is, I don't know. In general, if you think about like how you think usually, they're not Rambamists. They're not. If you push them to the wall nowadays, most people, since they more or less subconsciously accept the Rambam's theology, they ask, what do you mean when you say Hashem? You mean acknowledging, but that's not really what he says. That's what he means when you push him to the wall. You say, but it doesn't make sense. So what are you doing? You can give something to God and so on. And those guys really change all these like kashas that only come from the Rambam's theology. So they can answer you this kind of teritzim, but it's not really the traditional language. Traditional language is much more active, much more personal, God, much more however you understand it, but even the Rambam, when he's davens, he said the Jewish language. He doesn't say the Arabic proclamation of faith. He says Shema Yisrael. Hashem, even that pasuk is like we found. Okay, Shema Yisrael is just Moshe Rabbeinu giving a drusha. We somehow put it into our daily liturgy and like Shema Yisrael. Hashem like it's not like Hashem like we should have skipped that.
The Rambam Shneimar, but you have it Hashem.
He doesn't bring Shema Yisrael.
No, Shneimar.
We have to check. Wait.
And the mitzvah, when he says the mitzvah, it says the mitzvah of Yichud. Maybe even the Sefer Mitzvah also. No, yeah, I think it's Sefer Mitzvah.
I'm gonna check you. I'm gonna check. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So the kids. Anyways, the Rambam took this from Avram Avinu because Avram Avinu has the big source, which is.
I told you want to see it.
It says in the Rambam, "V'yikra b'shem Hashem." There's a pasuk of Avram, "V'yikra b'shem Hashem el olam," right? V'yita eshel v'eshav, v'yita. That's the pasuk. He made a eshel mizbech or something, right? What's the pasuk?
V'yikra b'shem kel olam. It says kel olam. That's in the Vayera. It says that he made a eshel olam. It's the same thing. It's the end of Vayera. I know because I once was looking for him. Lech Lechan wasn't there.
So, Iman alter trick.
But it's a very interesting thing. In the first bracha,
it's also Vikra b'Shem Hashem. Vikra b'Shem Hashem is in Vayivim Mizbech, the first Mizbech Hashem V'nimei. Then again, Vikra b'Shem Mizbech Hashem Mizbech Hashem Hashem. And in Be'esheva, that's we are the end of right before that. Vikra b'Shem Hashem el olam. And there's another one. Yitzchak did the same thing. Vikra b'Shem Hashem. And the Rambam read this to me in Vayikra, and he called other people to Shem Hashem to know that there is a Hashem. So Hashem Mechilim. El Olam to the Rambam means the God of the world. What does the God of the world mean? So the Rambam means the God that turns the world. Manigal Galgal. There's a touch El Olam. Hamutzi Hazeh. He had that Lishna Rambam, and he said that you have here.
That exists beforehand.
Exists before what? No, of course he existed before he started.
No, I don't mean existed. I mean existed in principle. Wow. The principle comes before.
If you look in Perek Aleph in Sefer Hamada, it says. Hamotzi Hazeh Ela Olam Adon Kol Otzvi Hi Hamanaga Galga. Yes, there was no says
Hamotzi Hazeh What Adon Kol Otzvi.
Right, of course.
Who are Maniga Galga?
The Motzi is before that.
No, he's saying he's calling him like Kei Olam before he mentioned the Maniga Galga.
No, that's a parish. That's being Mefarish. That's how I read it. That's how I read it. It's always you have to know how. You have to understand the kind of, you can't read. I don't know. That's how I read that. That's how at least I read it. Hamotzi Hazeh, of course. The Motzi is before. The Motzi is before because we have the idea of Mechiva Metzias.
Motzi is there, right?
Motzi has nothing to do with turning the Galga. This Mechiva Metzias, I think so I read it as since I have this halacha. That's how I read it at least. You have to understand this language always. I think you have to know the concepts. Manig, I already said, manig means the turner. Not the manig doesn't mean the manager.
Right. I understand. But even that, that's called like.
Yeah. No, this is clear. The Ram definitely thinks like that. If my DK is richtig on the mission, definitely thinks like this, and the Rebbe Aristotle definitely thinks like this. In other words, they say when we talk about the God of the world, there might be gods in other senses, like we say, there might be Mechilim Tis, which is another sense of God. Maybe it's a different kind of, if you ask him a kibble that's comfortable with having different Mechilas in God, he would say it's different Mechilas in God. But the Rambam would never like those language. But when we say Al Olam, we mean the God from the world. What mean the God from the world? The God of the world. What's God? What's this job? What kind of job is it to be a God? Right? That's really the question that people are having. Right? What's the job? What does a God do? Right? That's it. For Jews, for normal Jews, God has a lot of things to do. He takes us out of Mitzrayim, and he's going to bring us Mashiach, and he keeps on us from not dying until Mashiach comes. He has a lot more to do. But the Rambam's God doesn't really do that. Only B'Shem HaMishul, everything he does, and this is true. The Rambam says this beferish, and I have to remember which part exactly. Every time the Rambam says beferish, everything. So this is going to be very important.
I get to drive me crazy because this is what Kriyish Malaisa is. What you're saying is that UK Vavke is that. How do you actually? Okay,
wait. If you want me to tell you also the Ivrit Tash of the Avraham Avinu, I can tell you also. It's no shaykhs what the Rambam said, but it's another thing. We're going on the Rambam Shat. Okay, Tachlis is the Rambam Shat is what does it mean? What is the Mazay God? This is why it's important to have his whole. We have to get to the all five domas, the same domas. The Rambam's God is the God. In other words, when we say there's other part, let's say other aspects of God they can think of, but the God of the world, the Leha Elam, the Batan is Shat Elam as Eins von der Welt. One of his most Spinozist touches. But the Latan is the Eibush nicht High Hu Olam, the Eibush is the High Olam. Anyway, no, but it sounds language, right? Yeah, it's language. It's mine. Yeah, look, no, the Rambam's touches. What's the God? So I got it alles technically. That's what the God is about. Everything that's done, that's really what we say when we talk about Malchus, right? Malchus in Chazal means God does everything, right? The good things, the bad things. The Dalarichas Oilam, what does it mean? The Dalarichas Oilam, right? That's everything. Means God did it. You see, there, God, something happened, God did it. There's no place where he stops, where's authority stops. What is the task from this Echad? Whatever it is. What is the Ivrit touch? Now, what does it mean? Yeah, Ivrit. What's the Ivrit touch? The Ivrit touch is God manages everything, does everything. He's responsible for everything. That's what kingdom, the God's kingdom in Chazal's translation of Achdis to Malchus, right? Chazal, like you scroll the Shema Yisrael Pusik Malchus, right? Malchus means Achdis by Chazal, in other words, like they touched Hashem. He Shmoy Echad because they're also, right? That's the whole difference. In Chazal, Malchus, and makes sense, means that he does everything. What's a melech? A melech is the guy that everything that happens, he does it. Or at least in some sense, right? He's a bigger, stronger sense than. In other words, it means power. It's about God's power. Everything that happens, nothing goes out of his shlita, right? Everything that happens and is in his power. There's some God doesn't get there, he gets there also. And the Slam of the Recht is that's the Dal Richel, that's all that means, right? Don't say that he's only in Israel, like the Ramban thought. No, in the ganze Welt is the same God. That's what Echad means to them. The same God. Otherwise, the Zura say that there's one God for Lakewood, another God for months, there's not one God. Now, even the Haimashid, they still think there's another God for doing bad things. So they don't really acknowledge that God does the bad things. We say but we don't agree that God does it. We say the Sut and the Chvashbus, they don't have this idea over there, but we're not exactly happy with the fact that God does it. God does it. Okay, give him a sheikh, whatever it means. Well, fine, we'll understand that God did the bad things also, right? Or maybe we'll say Chassidish that they weren't bad. I don't know. Whatever, however you exactly figure that out. But it always means that he does everything. That's what Malchus Shemayim means. Malchus Shemayim is that God does everything. God does everything. Just like they see a Malch. I'll see the Roman Empire, the big Malchus always. The Roman Empire does everything in there. Everything's under their control. They're their real empire. You can't build a bridge without their permission. You can't build a window in your house. You have to have a permit from the emperor. He does everything. course, you can hide.
Where
It's
are you
not,
pointing to? The Gemara?
no, I'm saying the idea of Malchus, the Gemara, the idea of Malchus is an empire. Not a melech like David HaMelech was. We had 20 people running after. There's a real melech. That's their idea of Malchus, and they're really impressed by the Roman efficiency and bureaucracy and everything. The Mullah Kaliyamim Dioi, that Akdomis comes from talking about the Roman Empire, right? We're talking about no, that Akdomis says, Eli Kaliya Dioi Yamash, that Negemara. I don't know why I'm saying so much this. The Akdomis has this whole Nisach, right? If all the oceans would be, but it's like more than Shech Shabbos, and it says, that's Masech Shabbos, and Chalosh Shis, Rashi says means Malchus Rami. In other words,
that's talking. Saying these same words are used to describe.
No, I forget. Akdomis borrowed description for that. I'm saying
it took the language that's used.
Halal means
the language that's used for Rome is used over there.
How big it is?
No,
the complete.
They encompass everything.
Yeah, right. The enormity of the power.
And everything, the signs, the great. Basically, they were very impressed by this empire that really controlled everything in their territory. And God is there. Of course, the Roman Empire has an end somewhere. You know, there's the German tribes at the end, like Megillah, right, where the empire stops. Right? And so on. And therefore, that's a king, and the Roman Empire has an end, and God's Malchus doesn't have an end. That's it. He doesn't have an end. It's very big, whatever Olam means in time or in space, whatever it is, doesn't have an end. So, and that's what the Chazal means, Achaz Hashem, Malchus Hashem. Now, the Rambam's meaning is not really so far from this. He just gets very technical about it. The Rambam's meaning is God. This one means to have a God. Hashem Elikaini. That's how it's supposed to be Malchus, right? How's Shemai so Malchus? Because Elikaini, right? Kabbalah is what Chazal call Kabbalah V'Leika, right? On Kabbalah, God, He is my God. Like Havai is my God. Like, yeah. Now, what does it mean that He's my God? That I'm under His power. I'm under His dominion.
Doesn't need to serve Him
well, maybe Memaila, yeah, Memaila, I'll do what He asks me and so on. That's where He's talking about like my things that I have choice over and so on. But, yeah, but clearly I'm under His like I'm a Kabbalah Melech, Yichya Melech, right? Well, what's Yichya Melech? Theoretically, I listen to everything He says. That's the Kabbalah from Hashem doesn't mean that you're not going to drive the whole world back up. Okay, the management was thinking of virus. That's another problem.
No, his body you should include yourself in it.
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's not about of course include yourself. It's not about okay, whatever. Okay,
no, psychologically.
No, is that to obey? Okay,
that's enough. It doesn't only mean to obey. Also, we promise to obey. It doesn't mean to actually obey. Promise to obey, right? Like Gairis, all mitzvahs. Doesn't mean you can actually do the mitzvahs. It doesn't have to do even one mitzvah ever. Doesn't even have to know what the mitzvahs are. All he needs to say is, in principle, he agrees to do whatever God will tell him. Whatever that means. Okay?
I know Gary thought this whole thing was possible.
Why? Because he didn't do a mitzvah once?
No, because he does the various all the time. Obviously, he never meant it. I thought really different than the whole class was. It took him like about 3 hours to decap that Taka is no different.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's just as Jewish.
You're Jewish.
So,
welcome to the club.
No, but it's okay, not the Rambam, it means that he does everything. Now, the Rambam was worried about this. What does it mean that God actually does everything? He doesn't do everything. Right? Obviously, people do a lot of things. It's one problem, but even more broadly, that's a small problem because the Rambam has a teretz on that. Whatever.
I got it you asked it last time. Is that Kaylee when you say
yeah.
When you say
Eliata.
Okay, Ata, Eli, Kaylee, whatever, Ata.
No, that one is Zikr Eliata. I always say Eli, but that one is for sure.
Yeah, because you said like, what does it mean? Why can't you say it to a person? Like I want to ask you then, this Rambam, like your question, what's the big deal? The person does have power. Like, what is the definition of power?
So that's right. Okay, let's say.
No, so I started this. I didn't get. I wasn't going this thing. What's like? Hey, no, what the cat?
Okay. So let's go back from this way because I'm getting to. It's whole time getting to the same thing. I'm trying to be clear. So to the Rambam, what does it mean to say that God does everything? controls everything, or however you want to call it. To him, it can only mean, this is the Rambam's understanding, but I don't know if it's a different, he has very technical understanding. To him, it means he does everything. And Chazal didn't really have this concept of he does. He's the Melech, does, it's under his control somehow. I don't know exactly if they thought of him as like the poil. Every time you see it move, cup moving, you say, who moved it? God moved. Yeah, of course, we do say that. When we say, Burchat Hashem, who's the Moitz Lechem? Yeah, the Eibishter. I just saw the guy taking the Eibishter did it, right? In which sense did the Eibishter do it? This is what the Ram wants to know really. In what sense did the Eibishter do the Lechem and Oretz? That's Malchus Shemayim, right? That's part of Malchus. And the Rambam said that, look, I'll tell you the reality.
There's not different really than Boyer. If you say it different, you can't say Boyer. Really, we should say Boyer minimum Zion. It's not it's Malchus, that's Boyer.
No.
I think Moitz Lechem is the same thing, because we can't say Boyer and Lechem because it's the things in between.
Do it.
The things in between.
So we have to say that even it's
so
basically
he's
talking about.
No,
but how does it work? I didn't think of that exact example. It's like a more complicated example, because you see that because they're trying to be miyachad al lechem. They don't want to talk about the tvir, the chitta dekro. Lechem as a tzir b'fnei atzmo, but if you get we have to But the
Geffen, why do you say what does Geffen? Priya Geffen mean?
Should see Motzi Ayin Min Geffen.
No, so Rashi said the Priya Geffen. Really, the Priya Geffen means think much like saying Priya 8. Instead we say fruit of the vine.
Right.
We're making a bracha on the grape. When you take wine, the bracha you're saying is on the grape, not on the wine. Because it's not my. Rashi says why? Because it's not. Rashi says it's not Ma'aser Shemayim V'Aretz. It's Ma'aser Deyadam wine. That's what Rashi said.
But then what's it Motzi Lechem? Okay.
That's what I
But the fact is that religious people. This is the fact. Religious people ascribe all actions to God. Everything that happens, God did it. The fact is, like, you could get into details, like, are we maskish and shema and everything? Actually, the Mizbeach, Vikr, okay. This is the big shaila. That's a whole other real question that Rambam talks about. I forget where, in one of these prokim here. What does it mean exactly?
You have to talk about everything at once.
Right. But we're learning a certain thing. But I'm not, all I'm doing is trying to find the Likayim. So therefore, the Rambam, God saying God is Melech on something, it means he actually did it. No, he doesn't actually do it, at least not in the direct sense. So we have this concept of a proximate cause and a far cause, right? God is not a proximate cause of almost anything. If he's a proximate cause of something, then we say it's a ness, right? That's what Nisim basically are. Nisim basically never happened, only once in forever. What? The Rambam says this. It's more or less a fact. It's also the definition of. Yeah, this is the kids. This was before the Rambam.
The kiss, similar kiss.
Yeah, this was the kids like that. The kids like that. Was that? That's true. The kids like that. The Rambam goes with these things. Here's where he goes even more radical than them. I don't remember. You have to look in one of these program. Yeah, I know. That's the kids when he's being a philosopher.
Yeah.
And he stole it from the Minhag.
Who?
The Rav, the first Rav.
Oh yes. He was before him?
Yeah, I think it's or maybe someone else that they both. It's an idea that's flying around. Yeah. So in other words, so we don't really say that God does everything, but so in what sense does God yes do everything? In what sense is he the God of the world? Because the God basically means the one that does everything, that controls, that is Moilach. That's what it means. The Rambam had Moilach Geteres the Master. It's true. He said that it's 100% true that God does everything. Why? Because everything that happens, which in his language, in Aristotle's language, every change that happens, because nature has always changed, everything is changed. That's the principle, the basic principle. Change and choma and tzira and whatever, but that which is the definition of change. But nature is change. Nature is patch change. Chikha teva touch chikha change, which is another way of saying chikha tniya, movement, right? Traffic law, no, movement, and all movement in the end. In other words, if you'll follow through the causal chain, you'll go through the sibas, you'll get to the movement of the moon, right? The Galgalai, not the moon. The sphere that turns the moon. The moon is also just moving along with the sphere. And that after like 2 or 3 or 10 more levels of Galgalim, you get to God. Great. So in other words, everything that happens literally happened by God, just in a very, very long chain of events. But this is where you could see it. And it's not in other words, it's not only true technically, if you believe that there's a God, okay, everything is done by God because God is the one that continually actually, in some sense, turns the Galgal. And therefore, that causes the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So therefore, everything is by God. That's why it's not lie to say it's not a lie to say anything that God did it. though it might not be proper to say something. We have some kuvit for God, so we don't say about everything, but it's not a chilik in the mitzvahs, right? Maybe we don't like to say in maskirim shem shemayim aladov. Not saying in shem shemayim aladov. Nishchayin, we don't. Not derech kuvit, but he still did it. But only in a very far sense. I'm not sure. I have to look it up. To me, it's especially like this. God does everything. Even in Kabbalah more or less has the same picture of the universe. This is okay. I'm going to get to this in a second. This is, but this is, anyways, religious language that talks about God as the cause of things directly doesn't mean directly. Of course, that's what stupid, simple people usually think, that God literally did it. The Kalam actually thinks that because they don't believe in causes, or the Beis Halevi doesn't believe in causes. Maybe that's what what's his name said. Some of the Chassidish Torah about molecular basically get to the idea that they don't really believe in causes at all to anything. God does everything directly. The Beis Halevi says there's a fetish, by the way. And I saw Batal now brings it in this Ma'amar about this Mechadav idea. He brings the Beis Halevi. He says Imtem Tzaloima that they don't really mean. No, Beis Halevi says this. It says that the fact that I push this is just b'mikra. God did both of the things. That's the Kalam Shitta. That's the not the Kalam. The what do we name? One of the Kalam Shittas that Rambam Mamish is very hacksan. The Ashariya Shitta. No, that's what the Ashariya Shitta. One of the Muslim theological Shittas was this. They literally denied. I think Ashariya. I'm not sure. They literally said this, and he said the Beis Halevi said it's a fetish, and the what's his name quote, the Dina quote says that people claim that Hashem Tov shit is bad and he tries to make chilik, and then Hashem Tov shit is all. It's very important source for me. I have to look it up. I never found it. I don't understand the theory, but he has all different. He wants to make everything subjective. But
the thing stick with you, I mean.
Yeah. If you believe in David Hume's skepticism, even Hume didn't believe really in his skepticism. It's not theoretical kasha that you can't prove it. You also believe that causality exists. Not really. Nobody really denies that. Only he said that. No, okay. Seriously. But yeah, if you want, you could go that way. Most normal people, including, and what importantly to me,
when they put the eggs in the fire, they believe that the fire is the thing that cooked the eggs.
Right.
Not just happens to be.
Right. They say that God cooked it. They mean to say that God started the process that made it cook.
No, so this thing also became.
That's what they mean. That's what I want to say.
Started the process also. I think also
causes the process to have power.
No, the key. Right. He's the fuse. Key and B'tzoino.
What does that do with turning the Galgal? Turning the Galgal has nothing to do with me putting on.
Yeah, definitely does. So the Ram literally describes how the turning of the Galgalim causes you to open the window. That's literally his example. We never read that part, but we have to read. The Ram literally thinks that when you open the window, it's because the Galgalim turned.
But the Galgalim is turning.
That's his mushal. I'll show you his mushal.
Before the Galgalim start turning.
Nothing can happen.
We did learn about it. Yeah.
Listen, according to the Bria and Anhaga, whatever I'm calling it, Anhaga, whatever you want to call it, this Anhaga, Maniga Galgal, yeah?
Yeah.
Happened different ways or the same way? Like, so when did this thing start? That all of a sudden things started, that he started using Galgal.
By Bria Soilam or by Kadma Soilam, whenever.
No, I'm saying by Bria Soilam, at the beginning, it started right away like that, right?
Two things.
Bria and
two things.
The Bria and
Bria Soilam is not relevant here. The Rambam doesn't really use Bria Soilam as a principle. Creation is not a thing to the Rambam. It's important. We should believe in Chedesh Olam and everything. But when he talks, his God, that's what we describe the whole time. His God is mostly the God that causes the world, not the God that created the world. It's a very big difference between causing the world and creating the world. Causing the world.
Causing the world.
He's the one that causes it. He might also create it, according to the Torah. We believe that he also created it, but that's not the most important thing.
You're talking right now is how he causes the
world. Both two things. So that's two different things. The third thing, he causes the world to have existence, which is what I said, right. And he also causes the world to turn. These are two separate things to the Rambam, and two separate proofs. Very important. Right. The first, that's why the first I call Metzias, and the second one I call Anhaga, in a certain sense.
He's Anhaga, right? He's Maniga Galgal.
It's only but it's the important thing is that it's mainly the second sense which is relevant to us.
Now
for different reasons.
And the Galgal is this whole thing is called the Galgal? I never got clear.
Galgal is literally the sphere. So then in this world,
why is it called Galgal?
It's
Galgalim.
Galgal means a circle. It's a sphere. No, not a circle. Galgal is just this. You know the picture, no? around. The ancient people said, look at the sky, the sun, the move, the earth, all these things are moving. How do they move? Now Aristotle, like the things can only move if something pushes them. Something has to be touching it to push it, because I can't push you from there. Maybe I could blow, but then I have to be touching it to pushing you. He didn't believe that action at a distance. When Newton, one of his big fears, when Newton was a big chustavarista, but he figured out that there could be action at a distance. Gravity works at a distance. You don't have to touch. Well, you can make an abstract sense of the gravitational field and stuff, but he literally called it action at a distance. And people said even Shiga that it took me saying kishif, because it makes no sense. How could you influence something? They literally had this big principle. You can't do anything to something if you don't touch it. It's a svura, man. It's a svura. Just false. That's svura, but it's svura. It makes a lot of sense if you just think of the svura. So therefore,
we think we're past this knowledge. How does it start? You don't touch it.
Yeah. How does
it's very gashmistic way of thing.
It makes sense. You tell me how do you make something move without touching it?
Whatever is called, what do you call touch? What do you mean by touch?
No, exactly.
Like saying God is touching.
Well, someone talk about God. We'll think about God when I get to God. First, we're not talking about God yet. No, God is different. God is different. Because God doesn't forget. God is the one that moves without touching, the only one.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The Rambam doesn't actually talk about how. The rest has a different theory that I have to figure out how exactly that part works. But this is again where we have so many other assumptions. But in their world, this is the so there must be things. Honestly, how don't they fall down? All kinds of like.
Just define this again. How to think that everything is what's making ice melt.
So let's you have to read that shtickle again, because you'll see. The Galgal doesn't mean this. Galgal is only things in the Himmel. Well, Galgal are in the Himmel. Galgal is of the earth. We're not in any Galgal. We're under a Galgal. Right?
Is these orbits that
sublunar? Not orbits. You see, this is it's amazing how good the propaganda of science is. Everyone believes it. No, I'm just saying that if people don't really study it, everyone already assumes everything is. They didn't have any idea of orbit. They didn't have any idea of gravity. They didn't have any idea of chemistry. They didn't have none of the sciences that you know looked anything similar to what they thought. And that you have to get into the mind in order to understand any of this. To get into the mind of a person that just wakes up at Nish Kashim concept. They ask you, when you're 6 years old, you already know. There's chemicals, there's atoms. It's almost very hard to figure out what was bothering them. Because we already have the teretz, or at least a better teretz than they have. But he's looking at the Himmel, Banach, and he sees things moving, and they seem to move with a certain regularity, right? Every day the sun turns, and the moon has some other weird cycle of every month, and there's planets which each have their own cycle, right? And they actually sat down and calculated it. They did a lot of serious work. They actually had the people observing the sun, the stars every night, and writing down for years and years. When they calculated comet from like once to 7 years, stuff like that. They helped. So how does it happen? They came and it was not Aristotle, it was the guy before him already. They came up with this theory. And he said, I don't remember. It was a guy that came up with this idea, and he said there must be spheres, things, balls, not sphere means a full circle, that's where the moon is in that sphere. It's stuck in that, it's holding it. And same thing, all the other stars and the sun. And those things turn. Galgal is a thing that turns, and when that turns, the moon moves along, turns along with it. That's the Galgal.
That's what I meant.
Not doing an orbit. It's not doing an orbit. Orbit is a concept from Newtonian.
You mean the Galgal is moving?
The Galgal doesn't have any orbit. The Galgal spins, and
all the balls are turning.
They each spin in different ways. No, we don't. They don't really. It's not gears. They touch, but they don't move each other.
Wow. They're not moving.
But they're not all moving the same way. Obviously, they're not moving all the same way because you have to account for all the
how they move.
The English, they move. No, so how they move by
one
second. This is the theory, the basic theory. But the basic theory is forget about all the things you know about the reality. There's spheres. Now these spheres are clear. They're transparent, right? You don't see them, right? They're transparent. The Rambam says if you read. So the Rambam in 2 places gave a crash course in Aristotelian physics, right? And nobody really reads it, but in Perek, that's why the Perek. What's the Rebbe That's not believe the same physics. He's not even, again, doesn't even know anything else. Although he should have known maybe. maybe you heard a bit. Okay. The point is that everyone. This is the funny thing. This is the hack that I'm trying to say. That I wanted to say. This is the hack. The hack is that all these people going around saying that I'm with Aristotle. Look, he bought Aristotle wholesale and he imported it into Judaism. We have Chassidus and Kabbalah, which is much worse. Because the Rambam, at least he's clear with his assumptions, and he tells you this I took from Aristotle, and you could actually follow through the logic, and you could say, okay, this part we do agree, this part we don't agree, and so on. The Chassidus and Kabbalah 100% accept this same picture of the universe, not mechalek from one prat, and they already think that it's Kabbalah. Arizal literally says that there's nine Shoy Netzchaim, there's nine Galgalim. What are you talking about? Don't tell me that's only the Rambam. Arizal said this literally. And everyone, the Radzina that says Miyashik, they're all assuming this picture of the universe, the picture of the traditional Jewish picture of the universe that you read in Chassidus Sforim and Chabad Sforim, every single Chabad Saif Adayam Azeh, which is why they actually don't even let you teach your children that the world revolves around the sun, because the Rebbe said differently. In school, literally, I know a person that sells English books to Chaturim. Told me in Lubavitch they made him take out the part about the sun. Okay.
Really?
And
really surprising.
And
no, I never heard of the.
But this is what they teach in school.
What?
No, the Rebbe had whole Piyam Torah with relativity. The point is that they literally believe in the Aristotelian picture of the reality, and it's so much worse because you don't understand it. People in Lubavitch and everywhere they keep on talking about Galgalim, for example, or they keep on talking about Daldisardis, or they keep on talking about these are physical things at least. Okay, we at least realize that it doesn't exist, and people already asked Lubavitch Rebbe, and he said some Pirim there. You could talk about more abstract concepts, right? That's what really interests me. God doesn't change. God doesn't change only makes sense in the Aristotelian physics. Because who cares about change? What's change? What is this change that you're talking about the whole time? Well, not the change. What's the change? God doesn't have limit. This is also Aristotelian. All of these ideas are 100% Aristotelian ideas that we bought. And neither of you buy it and you say that I'm borrowing from him because this is the best explanation I have and so on. And you buy it and then I'm not saying that Kabbalah doesn't have any Messiah from Malach Gabriel or whatever it is. They might yes have. Whoever, no, I'm even happy that I think they do, and they have insights that Ram didn't have, and so on. But it's all Melibish in the science of their day, and actually the science before their day, because some of the Kabbalah was already after Newton, and they still did.
Like some of them, I'm reading about the Rayat and he never heard of gravity. They never heard gravity. Samachvav.
He didn't.
Samachvav. He's talking about the Rayat. Yeah, the Shabbos.
No, and then the problem is not this. Science, I'm happy with because most of us know very well the science is wrong. But theology is a bigger problem.
This science is wrong.
When he says something about the ear pushing down the
old science.
The ear down that's Samushel. You know what? Samushel. No. The Batal himself, by the way, already said on certain things that they're Mushel. There's a man like it and Pasha told us, I think, about the Zera coming from the Mayach, where he says it's not literally true. Because obviously we know that it's not true. Yeah.
Why isn't it today?
I agree with my friend. Where's Miller?
Today it's not true.
No, they use it, but there's actually a Ma'amar from the Alter Rebbe. What do you mean? It's not literally true. Maybe in a metaphysical sense. Zera comes from the glands and the wherever.
Right, no.
But what?
No, but there's no connection back with
somebody told me
everything is a connected. Of course, the Mushal could still work.
I never even understood it like that.
They mean it literally.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, it was once meant literally.
The spine.
Oh, so it's not.
Yeah, it's cracked. Matthias, yeah. Close to the moyach, down the spine.
But today is not the most thing.
No.
Then maybe if you ask yoga people and so on. I don't remember. There's a Ma'amar from Balatani where it says. There's a Ma'amar from the Alter Rebbe where it says that it's not literally true. That it's only a berachnius, whatever that means. But anyways.
I think Ramchal also, you see,
it
seems like an them to a Saksach and Berachnis. It didn't. That was something aside the same thing.
No, it could be the word that comes from
Look, we can make a lot better Torahs than him. We can make a lot better Torahs than him, but his Torahs are not the good ones. That's what I'm saying. It's a shame. the shame because we could use modern science and people do, but they keep on trying to fit it into the old.
One second. The
Arizal assumes again when the Arizal talks about the physical universe, the Olam Asiyah, or
he talks about
after 16 times the same Asiyah, you end up at this. Well, at some point you do. I know that the Ramchal thinks you don't, but you end you more or less doesn't. Whatever. Okay. The kid is the Arizal system 100% arrives at this literal physical universe. Whether you have to get through three times the Asiyah or 4 times the Dishna guy. And he says, no, there's 10 spirits, which are the Galgalim that we see. But let's and so on. And other Shonim. It says the fashion, it's Chaim. And it's not only this, whenever every mushal that he has from the gift, from everything, is always according to what they thought. Some of them are true, some of them are not, just like every other science from his time. But the point is nicht this. The point, so that doesn't bother you so much, because this everyone, you learn in Kisvedically see that right away asking, I'll say that. But the more interesting thing is that all the theological assumptions, all the Yesodus HaDas, basically, these whole Yesod of Eine Gift, when the way that Rambam says it at least only makes sense in his system of thought, which is Aristotle's physics and metaphysics. And they go together, the physics and the metaphysics. You can have
certain qualities in the English which only exist in this system.
Which only makes sense. It doesn't make sense exactly. What does koyach beguf mean? Everyone, Eine Gift like koyach beguf. Maze koyach beguf. Anyone figured it out yet? The Pesach Aliyah, right? The Kines Zohar says anti-chad v'lo b'chishban, right? Echad like echad amuni, right? He's just translating the language of the philosophers into Aramish, right? And what does it mean? Well, the Pesach Aliyah already reinterpreted it in a certain way, right? So there's a whole story going on here. But it's always still going back to the way they thought of numbers, the way they thought of counting, what it means that God is not countable. All of these things.
No, but this is a Chazal who says it's coming from there.
He lives 100% coming from there. Not some suffix, but from wherever. The Pesach Aliyah, the Kines Zohar was not the Choladais. The Kines Zohar is the Choladais. And he was sure after Zohar.
Is it all Yohanavi?
I don't care if it's Eliyahu Novi. I'm happy with Eliyahu Novi. But Eliyahu Novi speaks, when he comes to you, he speaks English, right? Does he? You should know. And when he comes to Frankrijk, he thinks, so is it. Man, what else would he do? Man, the has to be Islamic.
Ja, kommt danach, Abraham Vini, kommen zu einem Straße. Nein, so, ich vergesse es nur, wenn er wohl gekommen zu aber what came out to Linder?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's Chassidish Master. It's a traditional Chassidish Master. Of course, there has to be. What else is he going to have to talk to you in a language that you understand? And he's talking in the language of okay, so you say, let's take away the language and see what is there besides it. Okay, sure, you have to do that, but nobody's even thinking of doing that. Because they're all sure that the language itself means, and you don't even understand what he is saying, right? Man kann sich dingen. Ich halte noch schon sich dingen, not the everyone. Everything is gewaltig. Because if it attached, what are you saying when you say this? And then you explain that this is like the Sfira and this is like a Ivrit. And the only place you can find that Ivrit is if you read Moed Nevuchim. Even that, really have to read the things that he read. But at least you'll find out what it means, what the definition of all these words are. And then we'll start to understand if it, okay, now I'm not saying that Kabbalah is just Moed Nevuchim we translate. It's not. I have a lot of better ideas and different ideas and so on. But they're working. Sure. Oh, everyone is working. The background. The physical universe. Every single person until I don't even know one. Mickey Abraham. Gits from the end. Du keine. Was arbeit MSD with the way the world works. Now, does that make it? Yes, what's enough to minna? I weiß nicht. Maybe there isn't enough to minna. I'm not saying that necessarily must be.
No, what university are there? These Galgalim. These Galgalim. These Galgalim are what's going on here. They're not connected.
So they thought there's no empty space because Aristotle doesn't believe in empty space. There's no space between them. There's no such thing as empty space. By the way, the Ramak quotes this mamash can't see this Kabbalah based on the concept of empty space. Maybe that is all this choilik because he does have empty space. Maybe it's like to these everything.
And they say well the whole.
Yeah. And then he doesn't have empty space.
But that's not physical. The whole.
But then that. Okay, ich kann jetzt auch ganz kisvarizal. The point is not that. The point is if there's a concept of empty space, it's not even if they're talking about abstract empty space. By the way, of course, there's also at the end of the day the physical column. We're inside that column, and let's be real. That's what he will say. No, have to understand. Okay. Yeah, it's not a mushal. It's not a mushal. It's not a mushal. It's not mushal. Everything that's mushal never read kisvarizal, but it's not possible to understand that. Okay, I
only know Arizal through the Ramchal.
I know the Ramchal take the whole Arizal and pushed it back into the Rambam. It's so funny. A whole lot of Kabbalists coming to say that the Rambam is wrong. We shouldn't say that Mikra is mushal. We should say that it's true, and we'll explain you how it's true. It's not true like you think, but it's true like I think. The Ramchal no, Kabbalah is also a mushal, and we should read it like we read Mishnah and Nevi'ah. We could make more than Nevi'ah and Kabbalah. It's mamish gag opposite of what's going on. That I don't understand how any reasonable person.
He got it to Shmuel Malach.
Shmuel Malach. By the way, Shmuel Malach didn't tell this.
He didn't make it up on his own.
No, he did. You could read what Shmuel Malach called him. He didn't tell this. He wrote it down. The Ramchal's Maggid is real Kabbalah. It's not these theories. This is when Ramchal tried to explain himself to philosophers that he got into this. This is not a way to argue with the Malach. Okay.
No. I don't
know. What should I do? I'm not saying Ramchal is wrong. I'm just saying that his shouting Kabbalah is extremely funny.
He claims it is Galus. That's what I don't mean that. I don't mean Malach.
I'm not talking about this Galus part. This Galus part is
the Tegra of Kukah said that he was Mavchin in Ramchal between Peter as Galus.
I think that generally the Ramchal's Galus are actually much closer to the original concept than his Kabbalah. I know that there's some machlokes about this. If you read the text that he writes Shama Maggid, they're not that finished. But the point is that it's very funny. Okay, it's very funny to take Kabbalah and say that Kabbalah is like...
No space, go back
anyway.
no space.
Who is no space? What is the other side? It's actually nine. It's to do, these are names of the world. To do the world, okay? The world, there's no empty space. So therefore, the world is full of air, which is a thing. And then there's Daldisoidis, which are all circular somehow. Okay? No, okay, you want to tell me how the world works? Right? The world works like this. According to...
What is this thing that the Manik is touching? Or not
it's not touching.
Or not touching.
The outermost sphere. Okay? The sphere sakes. Whatever. The outermost sphere.
Now, let's say that's how it works. So what happens? It moves. Now what happens next?
So now, in other words,
everything is in the other one, yeah?
It's going to, yeah. It's like an onion.
Why is what happens to the next?
It's somehow, we don't know exactly how. Aristotle has this thing there. Somehow each one causes the next to turn. Not by pushing it exactly, but somehow. Maybe yes, by pushing it exactly. It's all much like it. Somehow, it's not clear because they move in different ways, and we don't really know. I don't know. At least maybe some people do know. The Rambam says himself that that it's not clear. This science. Maybe we'll still figure it out. The Rambam knows that there's a lot of kashas on this, but there were kashas. And so on. But yeah, nobody ever saw this guy.
Obviously, it's a right?
Obviously, it doesn't exist because the spaceships went. No, it's not a die, but they might still exist because it's transparent. Who knows? Maybe you can also go through it. But the point is Ashura Ba'alma. The whole Matthias and Galma is Ashura Ba'alma. Nobody ever saw it, and the whole Ashura is based on that you can't see it. So it's like Yanchik Adise, Gavaldig works. You can't see it. So, and you see the Himmel. The Rambam says you see the eyes are blue. Not really because the goggle is blue. It just looks like that, but whatever. He's actually right about that, but not about the fact that the goggle is there. There's these clear things they're made of. Now, what are they made of? So again, one of the big questions of Aristotle, all these Alti Nura, Alti Goyim, Alti Evunim, they were what is the world made out of, right? They didn't really they're not talking about who created the world. That's a question for theology. Then what is it? Masa Bereshis, I usually understand this to be Masa Bereshis, right? Nish Masa Mekova about God. What is the world made out of? Now the big machlok is, that's we keep on saying the story. There's a big machlok is einer gesagt die ganze Welt ist Wasser. That was what his name was. Next guy said the ganze Welt is Lift. Next guy said the ganze Welt is fire. Next guy said the ganze Welt is one big mishmash and somehow moves together. Okay, so jeder got an andere theory. Okay, what is it actually made of? You have to understand. We are so. I'm saying you have to chap what's going on. We all know what the world is made out of. Okay, there's a bunch of elements. Everyone understands, even people that have no idea what the table of elements are and what all these things are, they all know that we all have a conceptual framework. Actually, this is probably almost a philosophical assumption. We have to remember this. Almost a philosophical assumption of how the world is actually made. In other words, we have a reductionist assumption that the world is always made of smaller parts, smaller things, scaly, smaller, even in a conceptual sense, smaller, lower, or we could call it higher, however you want to conceptualize it. Right? You see cups, it's really made of matter, which is paper, and paper is made out of kach v'kach, and at the end of the day it's made out of certain chemicals, right? And we have a list of basic chemicals, right? There's complex chemicals and basic ones, right? We have this whole assumption, right? Some things that, and there's like 100, whatever the list was, 118, we have whatever it's holding now, really basic elements. That's the matter inside this. You want to know how many? There's like 100 and some. change the number.
Should have
They
been
keep on
26 or
changing.
something, you know?
Yeah, the number doesn't have a good gematria for
it
now.
doesn't go, yeah.
But the problem is that we might still discover new ones, so
Yes,
we
split it
should
up.
wait until we make the gematria because it's still not finished.
They do.
Yeah, we're working on that, but there's like 100 and something. So now those you saw, that's what we call chemistry, right? So that's chemistry, and chemistry is based on physics. So all of these basically boil down to the amount, right? The atomic number. We call how many protons are in the nucleus of the thing or whatever, and that goes down to why you start understanding what is inside the atom and so on. And we're talking about things that nobody can see anymore, and you have to believe the scientists that they exist. You know, everyone just has a minute line, and nobody ever saw an atom. Fine, you might be able to see an atom, but nobody ever saw the parts that are inside the atom. You have experiments that supposedly prove it. I also believe it. I'm just showing you that we can make fun of. You must call it Aristotle that he never saw spheres. Nobody, you ever see an atom? You ever see an electron, a proton, a neutron, the things that goes to the quarks that are made on?
You saw an atom bomb. That's different.
This is Shachadai.
So he saw
the whole world. Yeah, he saw the sun and the moon. The Rambam literally said this. You see the sun, you see God.
He saw the Galam.
Yeah, everyone sees that source. This is not very impressive. The fact that Maimonides makes, they also made stuff. They made boats and buildings and pyramids and
not based on this. Not based on this.
Of course, it was based on their understanding of how the world works.
Okay, go back.
They built the Roman Empire, built amazing stuff. People were like, people were really amazed. Like, people have been building impressive things forever.
You saw
forever.
The ammunition.
Whenever, since Cain invented the
weapons, ammunition.
Cain, So, wait. So, what did I want? I'm in the middle of telling you a story. So, we have this picture of what the world, how the world works, what the world is, what the matter. When we say matter, what people usually, I don't know when people say gashmis, if that's what they mean, because I think when people say gashmis, I have no idea what they mean. But matter, in scientific definition, is always this, right? So things are made out of smaller things. Living things are made out of cells, who are made out of parts of cells, who are made out of, in the end, chemicals. And the chemicals are made out of atoms, and atoms are made out of things that atoms are made out of. And those are made of smaller particles, and somewhere over there we're still stuck. We're not sure what they're exactly made out of, but okay, but we don't really still know exactly. But the fact is that this is the picture that everyone accepts, more or less on faith. In other words, we're told that this is the picture. The world is made out of smaller and smaller levels of things, different configurations of those things. That's how we get the enormous, beautiful world, right?
The scientists themselves also don't know this?
They don't know the bottom, they don't know.
There's a lot of shalas.
They don't know what the
someone takes a big book.
Take it on faith. The guy who discovered it.
Yeah, but every guy knows only one prat. You have to have a general picture, like what they call a paradigm. You have to have a general picture of how things are, and then you could work on what's in the third atom from the zweite.
You never saw it.
You could see with an electron microscope. You can see, but it's very the picture of this is an abstract picture, and nobody really knows that there's no neshama, for example. Not possible to know it by definition, but the point is. Now, of course, souls, anything that we believe.
Your point is that even physical science, I'm going to call it, is also based on a concept.
Exactly, right. No, I'm not saying that. My point is not based on a concept. The point is that there's a paradigm, there's a way in which we assume the world to work, which is much stronger than all the prutim. You can make a list, a whole swimschank of kashis on the modern science. Kashis. Just like you could make on Aristotelian science, and people did, and finally they decided to throw it away and make a new one.
But we're dealing, that's our paradigm.
But we are sure that the world, the basic way the world works is like this. In other words, if you want to find God today, basically, at least in the physical sense, you would have to look over there, in the bottom of the quarks and the particle physics, basically, or quantum physics. That's where you have to find. That's where you have to find God, and that's where people that like to talk things that they don't know what they're talking about. That's where they talk about it. But that's where we're looking. That's like where the most basic thing. And this whole paradigm is not clear that it explains a lot. There's a big debate on it. And after that, you go up to biology, and then you have evolution, and then you have whatever other theories are based on top of that. Then we have social theories, and then we have if you go on the human spectrum, or if you go in the bigger world spectrum, you get to weather. Weather is really only physics, but you can't. Knowing physics doesn't explain you anything about the weather. There's a big gap in our power of understanding. Technically, in other words, we believe, all science, all people have today believe that if you would have known physics 100%, then you would have been able to track every atom or every photon of light, whatever you have to track, you'd be able to predict the weather. Actually, would be able to predict everything in the universe forever. That's what we assume, right? Like a deterministic assumption. But not even like thousands of a percent of proving anything like that, because it's not literally nobody even tries, right? In other words, what we believe is just as crazy now as what the Rama believes. When you open the window, it's because the moon turned. Just as crazy. Both of them are based on basic assumptions of how the world, in what direction the world works, and how the basic causality, the most basic picture of the huge big picture of the everything works. Now, of course, it's based on a lot of details that we do understand, that we could show you, and we assume that we'll get smarter, we'll fill in the details that we don't know, and maybe some things we definitely can't even know because there's randomness and all kind of stuff that's impossible to predict. But we still assume that to be the picture. And therefore, when Lachtav the Rambam, I tell you that the Rambam said, Aristotle said that when you open the window, it's because the moon, the sphere of the moon turned. That's not stupid at all. It's just a different paradigm. But it's just as nobody knows how the Hantek world works. And like I'm saying, there's a big debate, and this is just Maramukim. There's a big debate, and especially when you get to evolution and you get to cosmology and things like that. When you talk about the huge picture of things, there's a really big debate if it's proper to assume that reductionism is true. It's not clear. There might be principles beyond matter, basically. The guy Thomas Nagel, for example, that wrote a famous book.
Beyond
Thomas Nagel, for example.
I don't know.
Beyond matter, yeah. Thomas Nagel is basically looking for Aristotle's theta in a certain sense. He's looking for the principle that guides things.
What?
Right?
I
forgot what his book is.
He's an atheist. But all the atheists hate him.
But he's looking. He said he's looking.
He has sort of
unity principle.
No, what's his book called?
The cosmos or whatever. Blah blah blah.
He's looking for the principle that makes things make sense.
Why the name? Why what's his name? His theory. Darwinist theory is almost certainly wrong.
Because Darwin's theory is blind. Okay, the point is that
let's say things besides reductionism, besides
reductionism.
So besides, why is it? Why was he saying it's not reductionism?
Because he wants to find he doesn't really have an answer. I don't know English language. But the basic problem is that all of this doesn't explain that the world actually works. I get the head with the like, what is it? They'll ask me
why
100 times, but it doesn't explain the totality of the fact that everything is working. You know, it doesn't. It just doesn't. Now, of course, it gets into like very weird philosophical or semi-scientific discussions and stuff, but not clear that it's true that we could assume that the world is really a reductionist world. In other words, he's looking for Aristotle's theta, basically. He's looking for something that's not matter.
He has a certain.
So we could think.
He guessed.
The religious way, the Hantek religious way, is to talk about the intelligent designer, which is not the way that I would have thought actually. But like we're looking for the guy that did it. But that doesn't really explain much. Okay, there's a God that did it. He's not
acknowledging that it is intelligent design.
Yeah, but this is not very interesting because, well, the philosophers like the Rambam didn't so much.
Well, not very interesting. Is that not very significant?
Not very interesting because it doesn't really explain anything. The God that I believe in, but the God that the Rambam believes in and Kabbalah believes in is the God that does things in a way that makes sense. In other words, is a God that there's really never a question that we add that the answer to it is God did it. Why is it that the world works, right? I don't know what this question is. It's too a big question to even make sense. So people look for better ways of asking it.
So why is everything caught?
The answer can't really be because God directs it to work. There has to be like a physical principle almost, which is not physical literally because it's not a material, not a reductionist principle. It's not like a principle under everything. But there's like maybe a Rachnistic principle. We call this Rachnis. I don't know what Rachnis means. Like a prince. Maybe a goal, right? Maybe teleology is the answer. There's a big debate in modern theology and stuff. If teleology works. Aristotle talked about tachlis, about things having an end, right? Right. So, for example, what that means, that's a scientific principle. Maybe you could say God is at the end of the theology and so on like that, but that's not just saying God made everything.
Well, Kabbalah kind of is busy.
Kabbalah 100% is a theory is a scientific theory. It's a theory that things make sense in. Not a theory which God just comes in and does things and emphasizes.
That's missing in the Rambam.
No, the Rambam also has such a theory. The Rambam is just not doing science for the most part. He's doing theology. The Buddha does very little theology. Mostly does science. Does that make sense? No, I'm serious. The Rambam says the Fetish. I'm not a science book. I'm a book about the Torah. The Buddha is much more of a science book. They really wanted to understand how it does work. The Rambam said, you want to learn science? Go learn the book Aristotle and Mefarshim. I'm not better than them. you want to learn how to connect with the Torah or what the Sod is the Torah, then you read my book. Okay, so in the Kitzur.
Again,
so there's something called the Lehai Olam.
What does he do?
The God of the world. And what does he actually do? How do we talk about him actually doing things? What he does, and what he does is like I said, it's also the proof, but I'm kind of focusing on not in the sense of proof, but after the Rambam is the proof. It's the biggest proof. It's what Avram Avinu saw when he saw the sun turning, yeah, based on that medrash. The Rambam read it in his way. But Avram Avinu saw and what the best way of seeing God, and a very important way, because that's what it means when we say the God of the world, is that everything, so basically, in the most basic sense, everything moves. Everything has a movement. Everything it changes. Everything in the world has changed. Okay? Now, all kinds of change, and I'm going to show you, 1,000 people like the definition. Everything that changes is caused by some other thing that changes it, and so on. And that always ends up by the Galgal. And there's all reason why. That's where it ends up. And the Galgal gets moved by one more, and 3 more, whatever, how many more Galgalim you want to have. But in the end, that's pure movement. That's the purest movement. It's an eternal movement, actually. It moves forever. As the Rambam says. It moves forever. Ever always move. That's at least this assumption of Kadmos Olam. And again, it's kind of a little bit Chiddush Olam, that I've already noticed. Because the Rambam believes that the Olam is Nesh. Even the Rambam, the official Rambam's position is that the world is created, but it's going to go on forever. Right? He doesn't believe that the world is going to end. Very importantly. So, and therefore, there's a foreverness in this. The Galgal turns forever. It always turns. It continuously turns. And the continuous motion of the Galgal is what causes all the other kinds of motion. The kind of doesn't explain how, but we just...
Therefore,
everything you see...
What he's doing is, he's doing everything...
In other words, in a certain sense...
Causes.
Right. In a certain sense, there's the sun, not the sun, but the Galgal of the sun. No, the sun is not the highest Galgal, but the star, whatever it was, the Galgal is the God of the world. It's true. That's why we get back to the Zura. They were not Mashiach. It's true that if you stop at one stage, the sun is responsible for everything. But not literally.
The Galgal Chama?
Yeah, the Galgal Chama, not the sun. The sun is just moved by the same thing that's moved by.
Well, you have these little balls in the ball. Like, how they
work? Yeah, you don't see a picture.
It's like a what do you call it?
Well, then a picture.
Like a roller coaster. It's like a.
No, what
are you sure it is? It's a track. What is it? It's a circular track.
Where does like the sun and the moon fit into it? The actual sun.
It's a circular track.
No, this is not a good picture. I need like a 3D model.
I have one in Chiti Giboyim, brother.
Oh, well, yeah, no.
No, you put a picture of how the world looked according to the Rambam, like a 3D.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but I wanted to see.
Now you talk about, I forgot about it. As he's talking,
a 3D model.
The model I was talking once.
And I don't see.
Oh, wow.
Something like this. But no, but this is not enough. This is just showing you how many little circles they have to invent for things to work. But the more important things here is that what is really turning is not what they're showing you as turning. This is nicht richtig, the video. The video about technology is He's just showing you how crazy the idea was, but this is the point. This is wrong. The point is that what's turning is the thing that turns it. It kind of looks like this. This is more like the old way of putting it, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
okay. The world is like this, and then, but this is, it's not really like.
But where's the sun?
On one of these
tracks. On one of the tracks?
Yeah, but it's not really track. Yeah, it's stuck on the track.
Exactly. What do you mean it's not a track?
Oh, yeah?
It's a track. It's not a track. It's not moving.
It's a sphere.
Oh, it's not moving, right. It's a sphere.
The sphere turns. The sphere turns. It's not a track. It's not that the sun moves on that. The Rambam has a whole definition. Doesn't make noise. That question doesn't make noise when it moves. All kinds of questions.
Yeah, they say you can hear it.
Talks about it.
All right.
The Novi Yecheskel made him. Whatever talks about. That's a.
What do you mean?
You read the Rambam in Chelek Beis in Chelek Gimel.
According to his type.
Rambam, the be quotes in the Gemara. The Gemara talks about it doesn't make noise. Remember, the kids said, I'm not sure if the Gemara actually had this picture, but anyways, maybe they did. The point is these are the things that.
More clearly.
No, fine. It's hard to understand.
Yeah, I think they had a whole different. They had everything different.
Ich weiß. the point is, this is how these things are turning, and they're turning the sun with them. Understand?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
No, that's just the one like the sun just like stuck on. You know?
Yeah.
According to the Rambam, this is the only thing that's going on in the world now. The Rebbeinu Shalom is pushing the Galagal.
Yes.
That's it. And once in a while he does up the Ness, which means
forget about Nissim. Yeah.
No,
but not really fit into the picture of this. Ness is not nature. Now, whatever Ness is, it's not nature, right? That's the Rambam's understanding of Ness. It's not
the Agdara is that he's like the Ksibah Crave, like he just did something.
The first.
No, I'm saying when he was doing a Ness, he's doing a Ness.
Yeah, but Ness is weird. You understand? Ness doesn't really work. Ness is anti this whole theory. Yeah, Ness doesn't. That's why Ness is a big problem for the Rambam. But at least in his understanding of what a Ness is, right? Because Ness isn't this. Everything we're talking about is nature, right? Looking for the God of nature. Physics. Right. Physics is another word for nature in Greek.
He makes nature. He not makes nature. He causes nature, and he
exactly. He causes nature, and nature means that.
What about the Eitzen Zach, the counterparts in Kiyam Oil? So again, whatever.
Yes, but that's another way of saying cause.
But that's not turning. That's not turning.
Exactly. That's a different kind of. That's
a Shema Bayis. Is it Rambam Maskata?
Yeah, that's the first time. But for some reason, he's more excited about this one.
All right. Okay.
But I think the real reason is. No, this one is also with Kadmus.
I thought it was Kadmus.
Both of them. All of these are associated with Kadmus. But the difference. After I was the chilek from the Metiana. That's what we have to read. There's a different raya. The first raya.
This is the point that we want to make is this is different than Mitzvah. This is
it's very different than Mitzvah, and the reason I think one of the at least there's another reason I have to get to it was Avshutza. One reason, at least, that the Rambam is this: what it means when we say the God is the God of the world. God of the world means the God that causes nature to work. Same thing. It just all means Shem is not different. It means the same thing. Adon Koler, in what sense is he Adon Koler? I gave him a whole drush about Malchus. In what sense is he the one that does everything? Because he's the one that turns nature. In other words, the Rambam doesn't need Nissim to show Malchus Hashem. Very important. Right? He likes Teva better than Nissim in a very important sense.
Very good point.
Because he likes the God of nature. This is Aristotle's God, literally. This is mamish copy paste from Aristotle. This is, and like I'm saying, a lot of people think. I don't know if Mekabbalim accept it like this, but this God is mamish literally. It's like most of the Rambam actually made Aristotle a lot better here because he's a better philosopher in some senses than Aristotle. But they thought the idea of God is literally us in the book and in the metaphysics. It's literally his God, and the Rambam. You could read it in English, and it's long, very long. It takes like pages and pages to say. Not like one. No, the Rambam, he doesn't have a summary as nice as Zilchus said that, but not at all. Not even as nice as this. No, it's very convoluted. It goes back and forth. Aristotle is one of the worst writers in philosophy. Doesn't write very well. At least not clear to us. Maybe in Zanetzat. Maybe then people understood, but now we don't understand. So,
David left there when he went over Kibbutz and Kashas and Mood and everything. He told the kid, you know what? Sit down then, Aristotle. I'm telling you, you're gonna want to come back to yeshiva. They'll do anything not to be able to not to try to figure that out. So I was wondering, so it's
impossible to figure out.
It's not enjoyable.
Everyone enjoys it. It's actually very logical. The problem is that modern people don't think like this. If it would be modern, the only problem is that, again, even modern people that don't learn science don't think like this. That's what I was trying to say. Because we believe in the paradigm of science, even if we don't care about evolution. Even people that go around saying that the evolution doesn't exist, they still believe that this is the way the world works. Understand? You might say that there's a God that magically does things. It's like the Derech Ness.
Even that believe in evolution?
Even the people that don't believe in evolution. You can then and see the victim of the Shira. For 1,000 years and say evolution is shaken and Darwin made it up because of the Rusha and he wanted to eat chaza, whatever the theory is. He still has the same picture of the universe. His basic understanding of how the world works is still reductionist. It's still very different from the Rambam's way of how the world works.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think that it's somewhat bad. I'm not saying because his God is then because you end up only with not having a nature's God at all.
They are having a
God of nature, really. I'm not saying it's really.
How do you understand the Chayda?
You don't understand anything.
No, it's not true.
How does
That's
what the Christians say.
No, it's not like this. What's like the simplest understanding of God? The simplest thing is the one that will things into being.
Okay.
No, other.
So that's what I'm saying. The first mover God is not that God. We don't know. The first mover God is not like teaching Chayim.
I know, but that teaching Chayim is not like something like there's no concept. So if you work on it, the guy's not going to be able to explain it to you, obviously. But if you
but it's a stira.
No, but what is it
a real problem for religion.
What is it? Please say, what is it? What is it? What is that?
I think that the God is the one that gives us candies and he makes mommy, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what do you want from the. What do you want from the Chayim?
I think that's the Chayim.
No, I was just saying the pashas that the Shach in the Welt, the Chiddush.
Exactly, but
he willed the world into. He willed the world into things.
But Bashach
you called behold Darwinism, not Darwinism.
The big thing is
he willed it into building
again. So that's also wrong. From everyone, because they believe that God made the world by derech nes, by magic.
Okay.
That's what they teach in Chayim.
Well, the Ram also believed in that.
No, the Ram didn't believe in that.
Not here, but I'm just saying.
No, whatever God did, whatever it took 1,000,000 years or 5 years.
No,
this whole question is so irrelevant. Who cares?
Yesh Ma'ayin is a nest. No, I mean.
Not yes, it's a nest, a very different kind of nest. It's a nest in the sense that science doesn't have an account for things happening yesh ma'ayin. Because science, the Rambam would say this, right? He says this when he argues with Aristotle, he always thinks that he's not sure. Aristotle basically thought yesh ma'ayin is impossible. Right. And the Rambam says, well, it's just impossible because you only know the world after it was created, maybe before. Yep, that's his basic argument in very simplified form. Okay. But the point is that after, when it was created, and this is definitely the theory of all the Mekabulim, sure, right? And again, the Rambam does less cosmology than the Mekabulim because he's very interested in the principle of things. He's not interested in actually just telling you how the world works, because he says for that you could read science books. But everyone that claims that there is a Yiddish science, they actually do have to give an account of how the world was created. And the second you're giving an account, you're making it logical. Basically, you're doing science. You're doing cosmology, but it's kind of science. You're not saying, the Mekabulim don't say God is all powerful and therefore could make things yesh ma'ayin and he just tapped everything into existence. They never say that. They say that God works with a sided, right? First he made Olam HaAk, and then he made Olam HaTzilas. And
there was the Kodesh spricht of the Ramban.
About the nest, right?
Well,
it's a big question if that Ramban is not pick up with it. Very big question. Very big question. I don't know the answer. I give a bunch of shirim about this last year, recently. A year ago. Very big question if that. Yeah. But wait, we're getting everyone confused. We're saying so many things.
The Ramban
believes about
the Kodesh should say, it's quite a ganz Kabula. What do you mean, Altanis and Nishkan Teva? Of course, it's a Teva. Chesed, Vir, the Feiris, Alt Food. This is the mitzvahs is more than Romanen and in Louis Man.
That's what you call it the Teva.
But Ramban. No,
but this was Teva. This was Teva.
The real difference again. That's what I'm saying. The proof of how the Teva works. Them do machloek. The Rambam weiß nicht. That's not the side. That's schon proof. The clown that there is a Teva. This is what the Rambam is mostly concerned about. Actually, when talking about Kiddush. That's why all the Mekbudim are based also teach it's like Hadmism. Nobody noticed yet. But people have noticed. In other words, the Chitzakad in the sense that they believe in such a thing as nature. The Ramban also doesn't deny that thing as nature. He thinks that God could override nature.
Right. The whole Knesset.
Yeah.
That's means breaking the Torah.
But in other words, Chiddush Olam, not when the Ramban talks about.
That's what everybody like.
When the Ramban, right. When the Ramban talks about Parshas Bereshis, he also thinks that Parshas Bereshis has a logic to it. He doesn't think like we learn in Chayim. The first day God created the days, and the second day that, and the third day that. He said no. God created only one thing, right? Well, Hiyeli, which is he says himself is a word they stole from the Greeks. And he seems to have misinterpreted the word, as the Ritva already said. But that's why Kabbalah is not philosophy, because they misinterpret philosophy. But at least you have to understand where it comes from. Or maybe he's doing Platonic philosophy, whatever. The Ritva says in the Ramban.
So that's
yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He read the Greeks and don't say such a thing. But the Ritva, like it's Ritva and Ramban. You have to learn shine. No, because he's trying to defend the Rambam over there. But but Ramban has a lot. In other words, God created the world. When you say God created the world in the Ramban's world, and ultimately you have to explain how. Tell me how that animals come out of the. And actually, Parshas Bereshis is like this. Parshas Bereshis is not about God creating everything. That maybe there's one pusik that says that. Maybe I'm not sure if there's one pusik that says that. The rest of Parshas Bereshis is how God created everything, right? Well, he created people out of earth and wind, whatever, whatever that means. He created animals out of the earth. He created trees out of the ground, and he created the ground out of the separating the ocean and the water and the everything has a logic. Of course, it doesn't have the first thing. We don't know how to. Let's say that with Yesh Ma'ayin, but the Parshas V'Raish is not about Yesh Ma'ayin. It doesn't even say Yesh Ma'ayin in Parshas V'Raish. Even the people that claim it does say one word. Maybe Buddha means Yesh Ma'ayin. We have to believe that on faith because nobody has proof that Buddha means Yesh Ma'ayin. And all the other times it says Buddha, they don't mean Yesh Ma'ayin, but we have to believe that over there it does. Okay, but besides for that, it doesn't say Parshas V'Raish Yesh Ma'ayin. It's not about Yesh Ma'ayin. Not about God just popping things into existence on a week. But God doing things with a certain side, with a certain logic. That makes sense. Of course, how do you explain it? It made sense already to people in Moshe Rabbeinu's time. So imagine how it's going to make sense to you. When it was written, it was understood simply. There's ground. However, they understood. I don't know. That was a long time ago. But
the rest is like this. The God from Cheder. You want to finish something?
The God from Cheder is the God from Nissim. The God that just has a work week, and on the first day he made this out of nothing. The second day he made that out of nothing. That's not the God of anyone serious. I mean,
and then the same thing. Why? No, and the same thing. Why is that no? Exactly what you're saying. Why is that no good?
Who said it's no good? That's great.
No, why wasn't that? Why do you have to say? Why do you have to?
Because it's not true.
No, how do you know it's not true?
Because the God that does everything directly, because God doesn't do everything directly, because that drama would mean that God acts like a Meshigan.
That's what I'm asking you. That's exactly what I'm asking you. You said why?
Because a smart person, here the Rambam does say that God is smart, because a smart person does things with a side, with a reason, with a tachlis.
Oh, exactly. Because since because he had the Rambam, the second one I want to get to. In other words, because
he has a function about God.
Like that he's a sikh.
I don't want to
if God is a cycle or not, that's a steer in the Rambam.
No, why if he's a free willed being?
Right, no, the God of the Rambam is not a free will being, and the Rambam thinks that being a free will being is a stupid thing to be, so he doesn't want to describe that God that way.
It's exactly that's what I was trying to get. Now why?
I was saying the whole time.
I know. You didn't say
not in this language.
You didn't say right.
Exactly. The Rambam will be busy about this, but yes, because to the Rambam, Rutzen is a bad thing. In other words, not a bad thing. Arbitrary Rutzen doesn't make sense. It's stupid. The Rambam says it's open.
So based on this assumption, which we'll call hanacha, whatever. I think this assumption, the Rambam was mechadish. Like this thing, we have to be. We have to revive the truth of this fact.
But he talks about this very barichas when he argues with the Kalam. That's the real place where he talks about the philosophy of that in the end of Chelik Aleph, Chelik Ayin and Aleph, and so on. That's where he argues about this, and he has many arguments against that kind of God. But that was the Kalam God in his family, and he says that we have to actually learn it. There's like very, very complex reasons why he's not happy with that God. It's not only it's both because, but the Kenachma is not.
But that's the God. That's the God.
That's a more traditional God.
Your opinion.
I don't think it's traditional. I think it's closer to what children think. Yeah. I don't know about traditional.
You have to call children without coming with this hanacha. You have to call children, call whatever you like. It's without making that hanacha.
Yeah, but it's not only about the hanacha about God. It's also hanacha about how the world works, right? You could talk about this that Rambam has a God who is equivalent to Seichel, which is not really true. He very much knows that Seichel is only maybe a mushal for God. He doesn't really think that God is a Seichel. That whole Maral is not true. The Rambam didn't really think that. That's a machlokes. No, it's a technically it's a machlokes of Erevis and even Sinna, and so the old again the Maral and days the machlokes zwei Araber. Haben sie gerade selber machlokes a long time ago.
And Sienna with who?
Avicenna and Averroes. Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd said that God is Seichel.
Then Al-Farabi?
No, Al-Farabi was the third person. I made a mistake. Ibn Rushd was the more radical philosopher, and Avicenna was the more mystical philosopher, and Al-Farabi was before both of them, I think. But the point is that Avicenna said that God is non-existence and all of these very mystical sounding language. That God doesn't really even exist. Yeah, that's his version. Avicenna. Whole Mechiva Matthias concept is Avicenna's concept, and God is above Seichel too. Averroes said, "No, that doesn't make any sense. It's just meaningless. It's just saying words that mean nothing." Therefore, God is Seichel and so on. So that's something like that. It's kind of very not precise because these are again. This is people's whole world of assumptions that you have to try to get into and even say nuchzon correctly what they're saying. But this basic machlokes is a big and the Rambam generally, like in most sugyas, he does both, plays both sides, and nobody knows what his like so-called real opinion is. But he definitely knows both. Not that Mekabunim came up with this kasha. Whatever, it's nothing new. It's
basically saying is that I'm saying
there's a stira in the Rambam. It's a stira in the Rambam. Versus stira in the Rambam. Sometimes talks about Yamada, and it seems like the Rambam mostly is on the center sign. He understands that God is not that, but we talk about him like that, like as one step or something like that. So very close to what the Tanya, the Pardes.
I just think it's possible. Theoretically, it's possible that Chazal didn't have this whole thing.
Yeah, but Chazal also didn't have nature. See, that's something where we can't really agree.
What does that mean?
Because this is again. So there's two questions here. There's two questions here. There's one question about God as God. In other words, like the Ramchal would say, does God only Keser or is God also Chachma? Is God only Rutzen? Is basically God about will, free will, totally free will, or is God work with a plan, wisdom? Right? The Ramchal says things like this. He says there's both. What does he say? Both are true. Is God Bashem Chachma? Literally not something. Sefer Mishle said that God created the world with Chachma. The Medrash is not only Medrash. I think it's what Mishle thought. And maybe, I don't know, some other Pusik, I don't know where the Pusik, and David HaMelech said, the God makes everything with his will. Okay? Yeah. But so, the Rambam tells that this big, again, he'll make it up. The Rambam tells that this big machlokes of Shittus HaRutzen and Shittus HaChachma. Generally, Rutzen matches the Pchidish Olam and Seichel matches the Kadmis Olam.
What do you say? Chazal didn't have Teva.
The Rambam, wait. First, let's finish with the Rambam. Rambam, I'm funny sentences, not finishing them. It's like no Galgo words. So confused. The Rambam still like this big duality of Rutzen and Seichel, and he is now. It's weirdly he is always on the side of Seichel, almost always. Although theoretically, if he believes in Chiddush Olam, he should. If you with Ruth, and this was what Ramban and others screamed at him until they got hoarse. That he's basically going the whole time with Shittus HaKadmis and he's not the Kodesh, or at least he's giving in too much of that because then the Ramban says that Shittus HaKadmis, basically there's no Nisman HaPasma, therefore Torah Mitzvah HaPas. Well, that's what Ramban said, and I think that the way disagrees. But that was the big machlokes. Now, the problem with really going with Shittus HaRutzen. Now, what is the real problem? There's two problems. There's like a theological issue. Rambam would think that this is a theological issue, which is that the Rambam says it by Tamei Mitzvahs, which is one place. I'm not sure. We have to look in Perek Ayin how he says this, but in Tamei Mitzvahs he says like this: that only Misheguim do things without a reason. Rambam has a whole theory that's 4 kinds of masim. I remember and games and shleimus masim shleimim are things that have a point. And if you say that God is just playing, then you have a very infantile God. He's just a God that's playing around.
But he doesn't have tachlis to develop any either.
Of course he does. So this again, there's the stira and the Rambam about tachlis also. According to the both shittas, the Rambam has 3 different times that he talks about tachlis, and they say 3 different things.
That's what the famous of Chaim.
No, the Rambam's big thing is that you are not the tachlis. That he 100% thinks. You are not the tachlis. Don't hold the gross. That he definitely holds, but because he thinks for various reasons.
Yeah, he has a different you also.
Yeah, but but that also goes back to what I've said. I thought about this all. Anyway, the Rambam, but the drama does think that there is a tachlis. You might not know it. Very important. The difference. But here there's another big difference. He says that once, but he doesn't mean that. He basically doesn't hold like that. He basically holds that the tachlis is known to God alone. We don't know the tachlis, but there is one, because otherwise it would be crazy. The Rambam doesn't think that a crazy guy is something nice. Not like the Kotzkereva that wants to worship a God he doesn't understand. He wants to worship a God he doesn't understand, because he thinks someone that's not understood, not intelligible, is very well said. So therefore the Rambam at least is avoid Hashem.
That also is wrong. Because the Kotzker doesn't mean an anhaga.
To me, that it just means smarter than you. Again, there's always two. There's a lot of playing with words because you could always just say smarter than you. It's just a different like good, right? If I say that God has a plan that you don't understand, This is the big difference. In other words, and really almost no Yidden are on the side that God doesn't have a plan. This is what I'm trying to get at. The Rambam tells it like this. Either God has no plan, he just doesn't. That's really Shittas HaRutzen. He wills things for no reason, because that's the definition. That's his philosophical way. No, you see, that's a very That's very Shittas HaChachma. That's what I'm saying. That's already. Then you're already giving in to the Kadmos Olam people. If God has a reason that you don't know, then you already gave him. Then you already moed of a mixes.
No, we don't know.
Moed of a killer. You're just saying.
No.
Let's be clear. We know. We barely know which side to open a book from. We know. That's not interessant to say that. Nobody thinks that we have to know everything. We have to understand everything. In principle, for them it's like an ontological principle. Is God understandable? Let's not talk about even God. Is God's world understandable, right? Now, the Rambam, this was a real machlok, because the Rambam understood that whoever said, the Rambam argues with this because. What is this? No, it's a quittal that someone wrote. Shouldn't read it.
I can go into
Okay, the Rambam said that whoever said Lemushlim, there's no Tam mitzvahs, really thinks there is no reason. So this is what says Lushan Hara on those people. He claimed that whoever the Imam Chazal that says L'Tarav and Sabris, and the Rambam says that's not true. The Imam Chazal never met them. But that's what the Rambam understood. And we're really theologians, this is the thing. There really are people that think like this. This is Nishkan Lushan Hara. Like the Muslim theologians that he talks about, they really thought like this. There is no reason, there is no Teva, like the Dan says, nicht that God is stronger than Teva, or God, that if he wants, can change it, or that he caused all the Teva, not any of those things. There is no such a thing. There's no rhyme and reason to anything. Now the Rambam basically says,
who's it Chazal?
1 second, this is the Rambam's categorization of things, very important to realize. And the Rambam's categorization of things, that Shetta is basically Shetta Sapikoides Belavish Tusi. In other words, because what does Sapikoides say? That everything is random, that nothing makes sense. If it looks to you like it makes sense, you're making a mistake. You just saw the part that looks like it makes sense, right? Your whatever, there's ways to call it today. And basically the Shittas what he calls Shittas HaShariah is basically that with God. God does everything specifically, every little thing. Not only that, every time that this is yellow, you have to realize how they think. The fact that this pen is yellow is not because it's yellow or there's yellow paint, because God makes yellowness and he makes pens and he makes both of them pink at the same time, so it looks yellow to me. There's no stability. That's not Mechadish B'ti. That's Mechadish B'ti according to the most radical reading possible. According to what Professor Levi said. And not according to most, I don't know if I'll ask Don Segel, who will be masking to this. He might, not Segel. What it would sound very flim to him, so he would chuckle with him up, but he never thought about it in this sense.
I don't know, but he means
yeah, but I'm saying a lot of people you would tell them they would sound, and then they would realize that's really, they think about the theory, it's a crazy theory. Because obviously there is regularity in the world. Like the Rambam says, this is in the Aristotle, he quotes Aristotle, this is why he thinks that Shitza B'Kodesh is nuts. But of course, Shitza B'Kodesh is what modern science believes, so whatever, either they're nuts or. But this is the idea that everything is just blind, everything is random. It's crazy because everything works. When should I? No, but again, at the Yesod, they don't believe that there is logic guiding things. They do believe, at least in evolution.
We need logic.
You can go below evolution. Believe like that. There's no.
I can't believe conformity without.
Evolution. Okay.
Okay, whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Technically, they believe like that. If it makes sense to them themselves, it's not Hashem. But that's what they believe technically. That's the image. And the point is. And this means that the world has no regularity. There's nothing you can rely on, like David Hume thinks, right? There's nothing you can rely on. The din is over and God made it come up yesterday. Say take Pittel Tillim, it should come up tomorrow. Nobody says that there's something to come up in the morning. Okay? The Rash that you believe that God does it every day. Nobody. People say Yotz at all, which maybe says that, but that's not really.
Someone tell me that Trump is going to win. Da habe ich alles machen. Da ich kann machen morgen in den Schofstein.
That's right. So again,
you think so?
He doesn't, right? Maybe he could, but he doesn't. This comes like a academic discussion. God could. I'm sure God could. Because they're omnipotent. Exactly. So this Gebet is very strong. It's like it's one of the strongest things that exist. This Gebet. And therefore, it's kind of nuts. Again, you could say that theoretically, the master, nobody really believes that God, that you have to say to him for the sun to come up in the morning. Nobody believes that. People, we could thank God for bringing up the sun every morning, but that's not mechayev that. We could say even Chadash B'Ti, that's literally what it means. Right. The sun comes up every morning, right? Doesn't mean that every Saturday. No, but that's simply what's created then.
What the next day?
No, the next day, every day is a new student. No, every day was created at the same time as the day. But anyways, nobody really believes that in the sense that, and that's why, and not only that, nobody believes that God has no plan. Most people believe that we don't know God's plan, but that totally makes sense. Why would you know God's plan? But of course, some of God's plan we must know because we believe we have a religion. We're not deists. And anyone that has religion claims to know some of God's plan. Maybe not the whole thing, maybe what he wants you to know. Some part of it that's true. Otherwise, it has to be true, at least if you're attached to it. You do know. So basically, almost nobody really believes in the really Shittas Rutzin of the Rambam. What people believe is a different definition of Rutzin, which is that God can't be forced. And this sounds different when you say that. In other words, there's nothing is stopping God from doing whatever he wants. And I also agree with that. That's at least in theory. Again, in theory, God could do whatever he wants. He could stop the sun from coming up. It seems obvious, man. If you have a God and he made the whole thing, of course, if he wants, technically he could. But somehow now we kind of a little bit stuck because if you only have the Rambam's philosophy, you're a little bit stuck to explain this. And this is really a shtickle problem for the Rambam. So if the existence of the world is like kind of a nest, for example, but it's kind of going to be forever. It's like you're going to going to last forever. And last forever in a necessary way almost, right? In a chakaviyah way. But the God that's behind all of that isn't bound by it, right? It doesn't bind him. That's obviously the Rambam also that doesn't bind him, but the fact is that it is bound by it. Right? You can't really expect an S.
He's doing it because of Seichel, because he's beichen.
Right. So now the Mekabbalim kind of have the very simple solution. They say that he chose to be a normal person. He didn't have to be normal. In other words, this is the Ramchal actually has a very nice way of saying it. He didn't have to make the world an intelligible way. That's what his Chanat Tzimtzum is. He didn't have to make the world intelligible, but he did because he wanted us to understand it. Okay, sad. But anything after the Tzimtzum, even according to the Ramchal, is 100% intelligible. And therefore 100% in order, and never things actually being like I said, Kabbalah, not even with Ramban. There's never anything that goes out of the order, and the Maral also with that. Everything is always according to a law. Just we don't know all the laws, so there's some like hidden laws that those are the ones that cause Nissim and so on. Maybe there's all kinds of different theories of how to explain it. But everything is regular.
That prior Ratzon also there's some kind of mahalach.
That might be
a type of law, maybe even.
Only in a certain historical sense, like the Ramchal and stuff like that. But I don't think that he thinks that you could actually change things. I think what he means to say the Hanagas of Ramchal is an even bigger deterministic thing. So it's kind of the opposite. What he calls it not really free. It's really an even bigger law.
He takes it over.
All he's just saying is that even though God gives you bechira and God made things that have randomness, there's really a more general law. This is really like different thing. There's really a more general law, so it's not really Rutzin. What he calls Rutzin is not really Rutzin. It's really Chachma. It's really Chachma. All right. It's really Chachma. It's not really choosing God like in Chayv. You can't. In other words, you can't really convince God to change his mind ever. Although this tefillah just means pressing a certain button somewhere in some oilam. That's the Kabbalah. According to the Rambam, it's not even that. Right. According to the Rambam, it's not even that. But according to Kabbalah, according to the Rambam would say that if there's tefillah that works, it works just like working works. Because obviously people do have bechira, and the Rambam really believes that people have bechira, and therefore tefillah could be some part of that. And again, Kabbalah has a better theory to explain that part. They fill in that hole, but the basic structure of how the world works is 100% the same, as far as I can tell. They don't really have a min of shita. They don't really have the idea that God can just do whatever he wants. He could theoretically do everything. So they're important. God is free. Of course, God is free. And he could not make the world, and there could be Chiddush Olam and all these things. We could have all this with Chiddush Olam. It's not really like someone would say that need Chadmas Olam because Samar is very busy with it. Hello? Want to come learn? Want to go to Babi? And then Rambam. Okay. So we could have Kadmas Olam. That's correct. You see the picture?
Tanya with the olive.
Don't worry.
That's the line on the line on top, and the line on bottom. No.
That's the basic. We didn't get to learn the
Well,
whole
one
thing.
Yeah, we
No, Chazal. You ask about Chazal. Chazal is very weak. Chazal don't have a concept of nature at all. Nature is a weak concept. The concept of nature. Now, nature doesn't actually mean to ourselves the laws of nature the way we think. But let's say it's somehow Anik love that. They don't have that concept. Teva, the word Teva, Rabbi Shalom, was made up by someone, Ibn Tibbon or someone like that. It's a made-up word. There's no such a word. There's yet Teva and Chaval means a matbeh.
So what are they? What was in place of that idea?
There wasn't. So that's the thing. They don't have any of these ideas, and therefore it's very hard to even be meshachzer. How do you say it? To figure out what they're even trying to think. By Chazal, I think that in the Bible and in Chazal, a nes is very simply a thing that helps you in an unexpected way. That's all it means. They don't have any physics. They don't have any ontology, metaphysics over here. What should have been. All it means is, what is a nest? Read a nest. Pass the nest. What does it mean a nest? No, you have to a nest in Chazal, but this is
take the ultimate nest.
No, but all of these nesim, they don't have a concept of nature to break. There's no rules of nature that have to be broken for nest. A nest in the Rambams and the Ramban, all of them they agree that a nest means breaking rules of nature. In Chazal, it means there's no rules of nature. So usually it's just a thing that's unexpected. Usually the Yam goes like this, and it especially went like that, and God did it. Okay, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, of course, we think of it, of course, it shouldn't be like that, so he broke the law of nature, but they didn't think of it like that. To them, a nest, in other words, take the example of them, the whole concept of Nisam, Nisturim, all these things didn't make sense to Chazal. Because the Chazal just entered the Pusik. If I'm in a Tzura and God helps me, that's a nest, right? Does it have to be in Megillah Esther? This whole concept that nest is defined by breaking the law of nature doesn't make any sense in Chazal. And therefore, I said this so many times.
Well, you didn't
major verse. No, I think I'm major verse.
I didn't make it up.
No, it's not so. I mean,
no, but it's a major
verse. So now, therefore, we don't have to get into this whole problem. And therefore, in other words,
But they do have a chilik, let's say, of Ashkoch. There's a chilik of some things Bashkocha and not Bashkocha, no, like kind of. I mean,
yeah,
something
of course,
like,
no, of course.
Yes,
but not all that means, right? But what that means is, okay. So again, I don't know exactly how their science looks. I don't think they had a science. Again, if it's hard for us to understand how Aristotle science works, tell the for someone before that. The Banish level, maybe that's a difference. I don't know what it's impossible.
Certain ways they should debate with you about.
Yes, exactly. That's why my definition of nest.
I think there's in Chazal.
Chazal has. Let me tell you what I think. Chazal, God generally does not get involved. In other words, to get him involved, he needs something special, and that's basically a nest. In other words, how do we see that he got involved? Something unexpected. There is some things we expect. That's why I say the definition of nest is an unexpected thing. What's that?
They don't think they didn't have strong ashkocha.
Like a nest is like a flag.
They didn't have strong ashkocha. Some just got a sterk ashkocha. And I help me and whatever. They take care of my stuff.
Absolutely not. No, Chazal do not have absolute ashkocha. They don't have a theory of ashkocha at all.
The psikim
don't have either. No, there's no psikim. Okay, I gave 20 sheet about ashkocha. There's no psikim about ashkocha. It's fake news. No clue. Hashgocha and Pusik means looking. It doesn't mean being mashgiach. So definitely have Chava.
So it's Chava then.
Definitely have but they don't have. No, they don't think
have the person's
special. It's special. It's special. You don't have a concept of God being mashgiach continuously. There's no such concept in Chazal. And Psikim, you could say whatever you want because nobody understands. But in Chazal, there's no such concept. They don't have any. Again, they don't have any absolute theory of how Hashgocha works. It seems always like in the Psikim that you need to get God to do something. In other words, either Lama Sish Hashem, that's the biggest Pusik and the biggest Soirish of a lot of Phillips. Why are you sleeping? What do you mean sleeping? Because they don't think God is sleeping. But the meaning is that God is not acting, right? They don't think that God is, like the Rambam would say, they think that God is sleeping. They don't think the Rambam had a lot of Mishnah people. It's not true. They don't think God was sleeping. They thought that he's not doing anything because he usually doesn't do anything. Not that sometimes he's more active in some periods of history. Some periods of history, right? But there's different ways to be more.
Why are you doing something? Are you sleeping?
But there's different ways to be more to him. Like you could show him how what a tzura we're in. So he has rechmunas. Or we're talking about Melissa Din. It's injustice. That's another way of being more. Like Kima Hashem le'mnichasech, Kima Hashem le'mishpat is such and such and tell him. Wake up, because God has a midah of justice, and we know that He hates injustice. Or there's different ways of getting Him to do something, but it doesn't always do everything. Otherwise, the different it's special. The different is special. Again, God.
That's for the whole year. That's for the whole year.
Okay,
So what happens throughout the year is that covers the right such a so it's so his mezainis are
MS, but still in a special way. In other words, because if you read that, you'll see. Again, I don't think they think that there's something yoitzim. That's something. There's malchus shemayim. Malchus shemayim literally means God does everything. But it's that's why I say they don't have a theory in the way that the Shonim have theories. They don't have any of them. Maybe people today are like this more. At least now that we don't like those theories, we can go back to them. They have something like, again, if you think about it, there's Abu Prakam, right? Why do we need all of these for? It doesn't make any sense to how to get people in Lakewood Yeshiva. That's why God needs to be done the Pirates Ilm and Shvias and the. He does everything all the time. Even Ashur doesn't make sense too. Not only to us. The Rambam already didn't make sense. The Rambam said first he doesn't understand this. He doesn't say that. He said there's a secret that I'm not telling you. Whatever it is, I see that he doesn't understand the concept of the Rishon. And of course, because there's the whole problem with Tashguch, he has to explain it. Maybe as a some.
We just say.
The Rambam in Pershas Nayach Rishon says this Indian is so. If you look in the Meiri, you could assume usually the Meiri to be saying what he thinks the Rambam would have said. So you see as some chat. But it doesn't make sense to most people because God does everything all the time. Of course, he does it according to Schavonish, according to whatever he does it according to. But it's not. Why do we need Rosh Hashanah? The whole idea of Rosh Hashanah is that God needs to stell a best, needs to call Aydem. There's literally a tiger and snag. All these things they're literal. I don't think they're literal. Nobody thinks that there's something with wings. However, it exactly works. I'm not so worried about how it works. They're trying to be Messiah. He has a bez, and it's like a bez and Matter. There's Adam. There's a time. There's whatever. And the Shoykels here. All of these things don't make sense in the total Hashgacha world. In any theory of total Hashgacha, even in the Rambam's theory where total Hashgacha just means whatever it means, it doesn't make sense. And it's literally true according to Halacha. I'm not making up stories when they say that there's a din Rosh Hashanah. They really think that something happens in Himmelach. I don't know exactly where. Again, maybe it's some kind of mushal, but whatever it is, it happens. Okay. Therefore, you don't have to be worried. Therefore, if you do think like the Rambam and like modern science people think that there's not really any breakings of the laws of nature, you could even be more radical than the Rambam. You could be like the Ralbag. I said that the laws of nature never ever break and never did break.
No nature.
No, you could do. We do believe that there's a law of nature. Forget the fact that we believe in the Bible doesn't not mechayiv us to believe that laws of nature could break. Because the Bible didn't have a concept of nature. So what does he mean when he said the sun stopped? I don't know what exactly he meant. Something very exciting happened. Doesn't have to be literally the sun stopped. What it has to mean. But it doesn't. The Rishonim are very stuck on this problem. We'll get they're very stuck on this problem that because we have to believe the Chumash, we have to believe that laws of nature could be broken. But it doesn't say such a thing in the Chumash.
I know, but
it just says that they went through the Yam Suf. Okay, I'm sure there's some.
But again,
nature is also not a defined enough concept.
I know, but of course, our concept of the world.
Naturally, there's nothing stopping it.
No, but the problem,
crazy things happen all the time.
But the problem of the world,
the fact that it happens, whatever. So there's I'm not saying, but you don't have to get stuck on the oil or menorah burn. But I don't know how it burns. I'm not even worried about that. It was unexpected. There was not enough oil. I was like a brand geneg oil.
No, but our concept.
I'll be a scientist. I'll take it to my lab and figure it out. But
they weren't dealing with this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but our concept of the world, we do have to say this, and if we're going to accept.
No, all we have to say is that God helped me in an unexpected way. It was, you could say in a statistical way.
There must have been a nest.
Yeah, I'm not saying that in Hashgacha, but Hashgacha again. Hashgacha is semantics. Hashgacha is ascribing certain things to God.
That's got to be a nest.
But not in the sense of breaking laws of nature, in the sense of being an anomaly, a statistical anomaly. And you know that.
But that's to help me.
Yeah, of course.
So how did it happen? If
God loves me, because God loves me.
So the law of nature got broken for that.
No.
How not?
No.
Then how did it happen?
Because everything God does, just sometimes we know that. We notice it. This also matches with the Chiddush way of thinking.
But something broke along the way. How did it happen?
No, nothing broke along the way. There's always Nissim.
What?
Nothing broke along the way. There's always Nissim.
No, that's a Kvi Chazal. Our view of the world.
Nature is even our view of the world is even less fixed. Right? And Baruch Hashem, I found myself on the right side of that equation. Thank you. That's a nes. For me, it's a nes. You're asking me if in general sense it was predictable from Sharish Never Aside. That doesn't make a problem. Ram said, Ram even used this excuse sometimes when he said the Nissim were never Sharish Never Ashes. I don't have a problem. It's a nes for me. A nes is something that God.
When the Daven nicht was nicht geschehen, because the Daven didn't happen, what's been a nes for that?
I don't even know how this Oibnish is supposed to work. Oibnish was nicht geschehen. It didn't change.
But it
could be that does. I don't know if it actually changed then. It's not the point of it changed then. The fact is that it worked. in a good position now, and I'm happy. But if you read the Tehillim, it doesn't say, "Oh, the Hashem Shabbat Chikate." There's no.
Of course not, because they didn't have.
Hello, thank you, Hashem. Things Adam and
Exactly.
And we don't. But we, even people that have Chikate could thank God for when something special happens to them. Nothing wrong with that. If God thought of it already, Shasha thinks about it now. That's very good. Like technical problem.
How he did
it.
The doesn't make sense. Ask Mickey. Doesn't make sense to thank God because I had a good supper today. Yeah. But then from the Big Bang could have predicted. Why shouldn't I be happy? I would not have the Big Bang. I don't even know how to predict it.
No, but then I'm time is the ganze Sache in
we'll get this Chavod is not such a problem. Chavod is not such a problem. Chavod is very easily explained naturally. Rabban talks about this and he's not happy, but Rabban is still stuck on this difference between Nirut and Nes, and he wants to be on the side of Nissen. But I don't think we have to have this whole difference. Very simple. Things that happen to me that I couldn't predict. Let's see like this. If I couldn't predict it, then it's a Nes. He told me that theoretically it's predictable. Theoretically.
Yeah, but okay. But then
my relationship.
I sat next to somebody yesterday.
No, he listened to other
block.
I wrote a whole mama in my book.
And I say, this is next door. I asked him if he said yes.
No.
I was telling you, this is not
that means
phone number. I don't think he used name.
Here, this is Koyach.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just like
I'm still going to get to our proof.
If you write this down, let me know you wrote it down.
I'm not going to give it to the proof.